I'm going to kick us off in terms of introductions. So, good morning, Happy New Year. I'm Robin Hickett. I serve as the Deputy Director for Non-Communicable Disease here at CDC. And it is my pleasure to introduce our new director, Dr. Patrick Bricey. Dr. Bricey just joined us last week, so he's certainly hit the ground running, and we're delighted that he's here. As many of you already know, Dr. Bricey joins us from Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Health, where he's had a very long and distinguished career. He's been a professor of environmental health sciences there, and he's also held dual appointments in two other departments at the university. First within the School of Medicine, where he's been a professor of pulmonary and critical care medicine, and then also within the School of Engineering, where he is a professor of, I gotta look because I always get this wrong, but chemical and biomolecular engineering within the School of Engineering. So very busy man wearing multiple hats. He received his PhD from Hopkins and has focused on a broad range of both occupational and environmental health issues in his research, particularly looking at the relationship between indoor and outdoor air quality and health. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your patience and support during our search for a permanent director. It's taken a long time, and I know it hasn't been easy for everyone, but we're excited by Dr. Bricey's arrival and really looking forward to the future. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to our new director, Dr. Pat Bricey.
Thank you very much, Robin. So I'd like to say a few words to kick off the CAT meeting. This is my first formal CAT meeting, so I'm excited, and I'm part of this important work. So I was going to say a few words about myself, but I think Robin don't care how. But if at any time you'd like to hear more about some of the stuff I've been involved with in my career, I'd be happy to have an offline discussion. But I focused throughout my research on how do we make judgments about what we're exposed to and whether it's acceptable or not, and then what do we do if we decide that those exposures are unacceptable. So this paradigm, I think, applies strongly to what we're trying to do here today. I'm happy to say that this is a priority for me as the new center director. And we heard yesterday from Dr. Frieden, who couldn't be here today, but he spoke to us yesterday that he reaffirmed his commitment to Camp Lejeune as important work. And in all my discussions with him, we talked about Camp Lejeune, and he's made it clear to me that this is a priority to me in my job. And I'm committing to you today to make sure that this is an important part of my commitment. So it's also important to remember why we sit here today. I think there's no question that a tragedy occurred, and we're here to learn as much as we can as a commitment to those people affected and a commitment to the public at large. We have an opportunity to learn something important that could help the people who are impacted, but as important, we can perhaps improve public health in the future. So what we're trying to do here is make sure that we generate at ATSDR the best science possible, and the science will guide what we do and the impacts of our decisions. I want to make sure that I'm transparent in all our communication with the CAP members. I'm committed to transparency, and if any time you think there's something become opaque, let me know and we'll do our best to alleviate that. I also want to make sure that we recognize that there's a lot of good science that we've been doing, and that science has been directed by a lot of hardworking, competent, well-meaning people, and I'd like to acknowledge some of them here. We're going to hear from them today, but in particular, Boris Masali and Susan Moore, who has spent a lot of time working on the historical modeling of water contamination. Those are important studies, and we appreciate their hard work. In addition, Perry Rucker, Frank Bovey, and Angela Reagan, they've taken the lead on 4 health studies looking at the health effects and the deaths associated with drinking water contamination. Again, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the hard work of the ATSDR staff, and I've been nothing but impressed with the work that they're doing as I've come on board. And I also want to thank and recognize the CAP members. I think it's safe to say that we probably wouldn't be doing a lot of what we're doing here today without you and your commitment and making sure that we keep our eyes focused on the ball. And I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And we'll try and honor that commitment by doing the best we can to provide the best science to address these important issues. So I'd like to thank you again for your work, and I'm happy, excited, I'm energized to be here. And I want to encourage you to make sure that you keep me focused on what we're trying to do. And we're trying to get the best answer with the best science we can. So with that short introduction, I'd like to turn the meeting back over. We'll now turn to Dr. Reagan for a recap of the action items from the previous meeting.
Good morning, everyone. We have a list of action items that resulted from the September 11, 2014 CAP meeting. The first action item, the CAP members requested that ATSDR ask for access to the Preventive Medicine Unit database for information on vapor intrusion. And that action item was assigned to Chris Fletcher and Rick Gillick. Chris or Rick, would you like to respond?
Sure. We contacted the folks at Camp Lejeune who work in the preventive medicine unit there, and they've indicated that they don't have any databases related to soil vapor intrusion. They track STDs, food establishment inspections, inspections of ice machines, and they just started taking beach water samples and analyzing those. So they don't have any vapor intrusion related information. Well, there are a number of different programs at Camp Lejeune where we're getting information.
Hey Rick, in the documentation for Lejeune, we have a Lieutenant Commander Chappelle who has noted at one point doing air quality samples at the daycare. Did they say they've never done any type of air quality sampling or any type of measurements in all period, or they just don't have anything on record?
Well, they indicated to us that they don't have anything currently. Now, we do have information from the base industrial hygiene program, and I'm not sure where that operation is based out of. Chris, do you have any information on that? You want to speak into the microphone so it can be recorded?
Morning. So, for the daycare indoor air samples, we're aware that the events occurred, and we're looking for that data. And I think it's going to be in the industrial hygiene database or in some of the reports that we're going to review, some of the PDF files. But it's not something, from my understanding, what the Marine Corps told me, it's not something that would be included in the preventive medicine unit.
This Lieutenant Commander Chappelle was the head of the preventive medicine unit at the Naval Hospital. And we've got these documents are part of the record of the documents that ours team gathered for the water model. And they brought a GCMS down from Oakland, and he collected the samples for the indoor air samples for that daycare sample.
If you've got those specific document titles, most likely. Okay, so if there are in Morse's files, those are going to be included in what we're going to review. If it did occur, most likely we'll find it in addition to those. But if you've got those specifically or could send those document titles to me, I will make sure that we put those on the top of the stack.
Excuse me, can I get your name, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, Fletcher.
And I realize I actually missed an opportunity to go around the table and have everyone introduce themselves. It'd probably be a good time to do that now before we finish the recaps from the last meeting. Just so everybody's name's been stated, we're clear on who's here. So forgive me for that. And Brad, if you wouldn't mind, we'll introduce and go around the table.
Yeah, Brad Floy from VA.
Ken Cantor, Technical Advisor to CAP.
Kevin Wilkins, CAP member.
Gavin Smith, CAP member.
Lori Freshwater, CAP member.
Tim Templeton, CAP.
Jimmy Stevens, Acting Deputy Director of NCEH ATSDR.
Pat Bricey, Director of NCEH ATSDR.
Angela Reagan, Branch Chief, Environmental Epidemiology Branch, ATSDR.
Rick Gillick, Branch Chief of the Central Branch, ATSDR.
Chris Fletcher, Health Assessor.
Frank Levay, ATSDR.
Harry Record, ATSDR.
Jerry Elsminger, Camp Lejeune Camp. Mike Partain, Camp Lejeune Camp.
Chris Morris, Camp Lejeune Camp. And Matt Brubaker, facilitator. Thanks, and now we can resume the recaps.
Are there any other questions for Chris or Rick? Okay, we'll move on to the next action item. The next action item is also assigned to Rick Gillick. The CAP requested that the public have access to the searchable database of vapor intrusion documents that ATSDR is creating. If needed, the CAP would like the director of ATSDR or CDC to ask the Department of Defense in writing to be able to release these documents. Rick?
I guess the simplest answer is yes, we will get you all the documents. There are some steps we need to go through. You'll see in Chris's presentation later this morning, we're nearing completion of the index. Many of those documents are available on the North Carolina Department of Environmental and Natural Resource website. They have approved us to release their documents, so we'll be putting those on a CD later today and hope to ship those out tomorrow. So we'll be talking with members of the CAP to see how many copies you all want. And I know Sheila has your address, so we can get everything shipped out to you. That won't be the entire set of documents, but again, we're working to get that to you as quickly as we can.
And Rick, if I can add, if there's anything I can do to help that process, let me know.
Now, Rick, is the Navy still using FOUO as their reasoning for holding up all the document release for official use only? Is that still the roadblock?
Boy, that's best answered by the Department of Navy. We know that they want to review documents for private or personal names and security information. I'm not sure exactly what that means. They are handling that.
Can we get in writing what their reasoning is?
We will try to get that, Lori.
So let's capture that as a recap item, and we're going to use the flip chart today to do that. So there's a follow-up around requesting written documentation from the Department of the Navy about document release.
The next three action items were assigned to Melissa Forrest. Melissa is the representative for the Department of Navy. I received word earlier this week that Melissa would not be here in person, and I just learned that she would not be available to attend via phone. She did submit her action items along with responses, and I'll be happy to read the action items and provide the responses to the group. The first action item, the CAP would like to know when the Navy Marine Corps Public Health Center purchased the first GCMS that was used for the Preventative Medicine Unit at Camp Lejeune in 1982 to test the air quality of the former daycare center. The Department of Navy responds to that question. As part of this request, the CAP was to submit a reference document which included the model and serial number of the GCMS in question. The Department of the Navy representative on the CAP requested a copy of the reference document, but has yet to receive one. Would you like to respond, Jerry?
Yes, that was my fault. I dropped the ball on that. But really, I mean, they're relying on me to tell them what model and serial number their piece of equipment had. Come on.
So, Jerry, can you help me? What are you trying to find out by asking when they purchased it? I think I know, but I just want to be clear.
We had all kinds of excuses that have been made over the years by the Department of the Navy why they kept saying we didn't know what was in the water. We didn't know, we didn't have the technology or the abilities to test this stuff. And then we find out that in 1981, they had a GCMS. They owned one. It was at the Navy Environmental Health Center in Norfolk. They used it to test the air quality in the daycare center that they made out of the exterminators building. Why didn't they use it to test the water? But I want to know, I mean, we know they had it in 81. I want to know how early, how many years before that did they own this piece of equipment?
Because if we do that, we suspect there might be some data that's for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Price said, I mean, that's the issue with what they knew when they knew it has been ongoing for the 7 years that I've been involved longer. The official stance from Marine Corps was up until 1982. They really did not know what was in the water or have a grasp of understanding of what the contaminants were. And it wasn't until 84, 85 that they took action to start removing the wells offline. We know in 82 that one of the labs actually performed the GCMS test on the water in Camp Lejeune and quantified the actual readings. For example, the emergency room sink is 1,400 parts per billion TCE. Jerry came across this document last year where they have a Hewlett-Packard GCMS machine at the Navy Environmental Health Center back in the 80s. So the natural question is, were they doing their own testing? Do they have analytical results for that testing? And that's one of the things we want to run down by finding out about this machine.
Yeah, and also LANDIV, which is the Atlantic Division, the Navy Facilities Engineering Command, out of Norfolk, was sending personnel down to Camp Lejeune on a regular basis to pull water samples, especially out at the rifle range. They discovered a drinking water well out at the rifle range, on the rifle range water system, that had 4 parts per billion of TCE in the raw water. They immediately took that well offline. 4 parts per billion. They had 1,400 parts per billion in the tap water over on the main drinking water system that had no point. And they didn't do anything for 4 years.
And this testing started as early as 1980, 81. And, the rifle range, what is intriguing about the rifle range is that testing was going on concurrently while there were warnings written by other labs to the Navy and Marine Corps stating that the water at Head Knot Point was highly contaminated with solvents. But yet, no testing was done there. And evidently, they had to quantify that testing somehow. So, we want to know when the capability was there, and also are there other test results that have not been released to ATSDR and to the public.
So I'll just echo that, we're equally as interested in whatever data might be available in whatever form, and try to come across it, discover it as thoroughly as we possibly can as well. So I think we're on the same page.
I'll just say, as someone who lived on base from 80 to 83, it's particularly important to know exactly what happened. There may never be justice for it, but I want to know exactly what they knew when they knew it while they were allowing me to drink that poison water.
Well, we knew that they were pulling samples way back in the early 80s, and they were taking these samples back to Norfolk with them. And because we got memorandums for the record written by the base quality lab person, Elizabeth Betts, where she made note that they were coming down and taking these water samples, and they were putting them in boxes, in jars, and they weren't even putting them on ice. So, but we know they were taking samples back to Norfolk. And if they had a GCMS, I'm sure that they were probably running their own tests on the side.
Jerry, Mike, and Lori, Jana is capturing those action items, and she will get those to the Department of Navy. But I asked during the break that we all meet so we can make sure that we've captured everything correctly.
Their excuse that I didn't provide them with the model and serial number of their own piece of equipment. I mean, really? Yeah, these people, they try to blow smoke up your butt, and then they try to tell you your seat's on fire. Yeah.
That would be one of those 4-letter words we talked about.
The next action item assigned to the Department of the Navy. The CAP wants to know, in light of the July 9, 2014 EPA Region 9 memorandum, is the Navy Marine Corps planning to personally notify women at Camp Lejeune who may have been in the past or might now currently be exposed to TCE via vapor intrusion? The CAP recommends this notification include all buildings over the TCE plume, and especially the 12 buildings currently being investigated for vapor intrusion. Immediate communication should occur with current workers and residents who are potentially exposed now to explain the recent EPA memorandum recommendations. I'll read the response from the Department of the Navy. The response: following the EPA guidelines, comprehensive vapor intrusion studies are going on at several locations on Camp Lejeune for multiple groundwater contaminants, including TCE. The EPA Region 9 memorandum provides additional information on TCE, and relevant portions have been incorporated into the complex decision-making process for vapor intrusion studies on Camp Lejeune. If a comprehensive assessment suggests potential vapor intrusion concerns for TCE or other compounds on Camp Lejeune, the Marine Corps will provide the fact sheets and plan for appropriate follow-up on measures to the building occupants in a timely manner.
So it's my understanding that exposure to TCE for a woman who is of childbearing age, exposure can cause a cardiac defect in as little as 1 day of exposure. If we are looking at possible buildings for vapor intrusion, I think this response is very lacking, and that there could be current exposure right now.
I would like them to define timely manner.
I'd also like to ask that they provide the exact details of how they contact them, what they used to contact them, and what the content was that they put in that contact, which we asked for last time, by the way.
There's a group of follow-up items connected to this. We'll make sure we get the language right during break.
Before I forget, I would like to say that if they cannot send her or have her on the phone, I would like a substitute next time.
Sure, we'll capture that. The next action item assigned to the Department of the Navy. The CAP also wants the Marine Corps to consider how to inform women who lived in areas of potential vapor intrusion between 1985 and now, and a list of methods the Marine Corps would follow to identify, locate, and communicate with the women. Note that solely putting the information on the website is not sufficient, because the website focuses on exposures before March 1985 and misses a large group of potentially exposed women. I'll read the response from the Department of the Navy. The Marine Corps is committed to providing accurate information to any individuals that may be affected by these issues. Based on the results of a comprehensive vapor intrusion assessment, the Marine Corps will utilize effective notification measures to relay accurate and reliable information. Are there any questions or comments?
Can you laugh out loud?
They're waiting until after. Who knows when that's going to be.
What do you say to that?
Number 5.
Yeah.
The next action item, the CAP requested an electronic copy of Chris Fletcher's PowerPoint presentation. Sheila?
Hi, I believe at the last CAP meeting we provided hard copies of that. Is that?
We also sent it out electronically on the 16th of December. So if anyone doesn't have it, please let us know.
action item is for Rob Robinson. The CAP requested more information on the rates used to calculate recreational swimming pool exposure.
In development of the public health assessment looking at drinking water exposures, we're using information from EPA Exposures Factor Handbook. Our health assessment will be very clear on what assumptions we made, what parameters we used for calculating exposures. We want to make it as transparent as possible. It's the reason we put it out for peer review. It's the reason we put it out for public comment.
And you got to remember that the training pools were also indoors, so that stuff just didn't go away with the breeze. I mean, when the splashing in the water and that stuff volatilizes, and it stayed there in that building for a while.
And our model is a box model, which does account for closure of a building. So we know it's indoor, and we accounted for that in our modeling and our exposure calculations.
Any other questions for Rick? The next action item, the CAP requested that ATSDR's legal counsel provide a statement that says that ATSDR does not have authority over the administrative record or any ability to dictate what's included in the administrative record. Our leadership here did meet with the Office of General Counsel, and I have a copy of the letter here, and there are copies in the back for everyone. I can read the letter for the record, or we can leave. The next action item was assigned to the CAP. The CAP will develop language for requesting the development of a relational database for the Camp Lejeune data sources. So I'll open the floor for the CAP to respond. The CAP will develop language for requesting the development of a relational database for the Camp Lejeune data sources.
I think we were supposed to come up with some sort of language on exactly what we wanted so that she could narrow it down and present it. So we gave her exactly what we wanted and she could just take it to them.
Wanted from what? For what?
For the database, like how we wanted it organized and is that right? And
You're referring to Melissa Forrest? Yes.
I think that's all I can think that it would be.
Jerry, this was the database we had talked about. If the Department of Navy put together a database of all their environmental data, having it as a relational database would allow for more robust data searching and analysis.
And we were supposed to form the language for her to take that to them and ask for it. So I think having the action items moved the way we discussed yesterday will be helpful because some of this stuff is so, it just slips between the cracks.
Right.
And,
Yep.
So can I, we did think that this is not clear to me exactly what you're asking. There's a database of a database could be lots of things. There's a database of all the reports and all the files that are going to be gathered as part of our work.
right, so we can have a searchable database. And we felt like the Department of Navy should do that work instead of putting that work on this agency. That they should do that so that this agency can then utilize what they've done. We feel like it's their responsibility.
You mean, but this agency, you mean ATSDR?
Yes. So we're trying to say, Department of Navy, give us these documents in this form so that the scientists can do their work of science.
Oh, I remember now.
Instead of them having to make, clerical work that's pretty time consuming, but clearly the Department of Navy has the resources to do this. So they should do it. They should just do it. And we shouldn't have to form language to explain to them why this is needed.
You see, that language, that's part of their strategy. I mean, historically, all through this issue, is you ought to see the crap that they dumped on Morris and his team. Stuff that, was completely irrelevant. But that's part of their strategy. They're going to make it as hard as they can for you to find what you need to find.
Yeah, so giving them language, I don't think it's going to make them give us a functional database of all the records and files.
Well, the Navy has an environmental document file, but thing's a monster.
Is the request really that the Navy provide ATSDR with a database, functional database, with all their records and all their files related to Camp Lejeune?
And construct it in a way where they can speed up Rick and Chris's work.
And Dr. Bryce, to kind of put things in context of what Jerry was talking about back in 2009, 2010, there was a portal discovered, an electronic portal that the Navy created to place all the fuel farm documents and the fuel bins and contamination information.
All the fuel.
All fuel, UST, it's called the UST's portal. And anyways, long story short, they turned over to Morrison's team the portal. And then by the time Morris that embedded in all the stuff was the instructions on how to use it. And kind of like, well, it's all there, you can figure it out. It's all common sense. But, that's the kind of mentality we're dealing with, is you have a huge document done with thousands, I think it's 1,500 documents, and then you're talking over probably 100,000 pages of documents. And oh, by the way, in this little obscure spot, there's a little piece here that tells you how to run the whole thing.
So I understand entirely. What I'd like to do, if you guys can allow me, is to sit down with our staff and talk about how we get data from the Navy, how we get reports from the Navy, and how we can make that more functional for us. So I get some feedback from the people who are going to be using it about a better way to do that, and then we can go back to the Navy with a request if there's something they can do better.
Well, they got so many documents that were created by so many different programs over the years, and they just dump that stuff on you.
I agree, yeah.
And you can't do a word search in it. You've got to go back and recreate it and load it all into one program, so that you can then go through and do word search on it. The circle files. There's so many different programs those documents were created under, and then they hand numbered them.
Yeah, I understand. But I think it's a huge task. I just want to make sure that the ATSDR scientists who are using these data have some input into exactly what we're trying to get the Navy to give us. Is that fair? That's fair.
And one last thing I want to make sure too is, I do not want to leave the Navy in a important position to decide what documents are important or not. The main thing is the ability to search these documents in a format that's useful for Morris and y'all's work on everyone at ATSDR to use. Because what Jerry's talking about, you'll have one document that's scanned as a PDF, and you can search every word in it. And one is a picture, and then one is handwritten. You can't do anything with it, and there's just so many different ways that these documents are collated and put together that they're not useful. And but as far as paring down what is being delivered, I'd rather have everything and let us try to sort through it, then the Navy say, well, here's what we think you need, and give them what they think, because we've gotten to that space several times and found out that if you don't ask the question in the correct manner at the correct time of day, the right celestial alignment, you're not going to get the right answer. You're not going to get what you want. Right.
And I would say, as a way of looking at it, do you think if this was a homeland security issue, that and they thought that there was a threat of foreign terrorism, that they could get a database ready very quickly? And so I would say this is a homeland security issue, because we have our forces and their families under threat. And so, it's homeland security. Get on it.
Thank you. I think I understand.
The next 3 action items were assigned to the Veterans Administration, Representative Jim Samso and Bob Clay. We have Brad Floor here. I'll read the 3 action items. The CAP wants a representative from the Veterans Health Administration to attend the CAP meetings in person. The CAP requested that the VA update their Camp Lejeune website to remove outdated and inaccurate information and replace with current information. And the CAP also requested a copy of the training materials that are given to examiners to evaluate claims. Brian?
Angela, could you check and see if there's anybody on the line from VHA?
Just a little bit. That should be open. Is anybody on the line from VHA?
We were expecting somebody to be on line.
Yeah, we have.
Yes, I was.
Who can we check to see if they're?
Yeah, it's on. It's showing on, right? Yeah.
Well, I can't say what happened to them, but I did ask that they. Initially, I had gotten a couple of subject matter experts to appear today because of the time that late time they were not able to make it. They were going to dial in, and then it was decided that the chief consultant for disability medical assistance and his deputy were going to dial in, but they were called away. But I did get some information on those 3 items as far as getting a VHA representative to appear in person. I asked them, sent that to them, and that was going to happen, but it didn't work out for this meeting. But I expect the next one that we'll be able to work that out. The OPH website with respect to Camp Lejeune, I'm advised by the Office of Public Health that it is up to date. It is accurate what is on it. And the training materials are internal VA documents. They have been sent to Senator Burr and his staff. They're available there, should you want them. I'm sure you can get them from his office.
Now, you're telling me that your website pertaining to Camp Lejeune is up to date?
It's a VHA website, Office of Public Health. They're telling me that it is up to date, yes.
Well, I'm telling you, they're full of crap. Okay?
Jerry, if you'll let me know, right, you don't have to go into it now. You've got my email. Tell me what you think is wrong, and I'll take care of it and look at it.
We did last meeting.
They have a PDF filed copy of the July 2003 Cox Facts for TCE on their website. 2003, Brad.
2003?
Yeah.
I think from an ATSDR's perspective, it's important that we all have the same information, same data. So I think we can look also at their website, and if we think there's stuff that can be updated, I think it's important.
But see, there's a lot of things that aren't included on that website, and it's not because it's a mistake, it's refusal. There's the phrase on that website website says the duration and intensity of the exposure at Camp Lejeune are unknown. The geographic extent of contamination by specific chemicals also is unknown. The water bottle report was made public in March of 2013. This language is ending up in VBA decisions as well. It says, health effects from toxic water exposure studies currently being conducted by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, or ATSDR, may in the future provide scientific information to help evaluate possible service connection for health effects or to make policy changes. The only way you're going to make policy changes is if you accept the science that was conducted by ATSDR. And ATSDR's work was peer reviewed. Now, do you or do you not accept the work that's been done by ATSDR? Does the VA accept that as legitimate? I want a yes or no, Brad, not a no, okay?
Jerry, I think I've told you before, I'm neither a scientist or a medical professional.
I'm not, but you're making decisions.
I appreciate the work that's been done. Our subject matter experts by medical opinions are aware of ATSDR studies. They've reviewed them. They incorporate them. I've seen some of the language.
Where's the training letter? The last training letter the VA put out on Camp Lejeune was 29 November 2011. And how are you disseminating this information out to your so-called subject matter experts?
It doesn't go through our training letter. That's a VBA training letter. It has nothing to do with the other subject matter experts and medical opinions.
What?
It has nothing to do with medical opinions provided. That's the training letter is for VBA for processing claims.
Well, I beg to differ, but I've got denials here that specifically state that they've done meta-analysis of all the studies done for the past 2 decades, and that they could find no evidence that TCE causes cancer.
Well, that's not from a VBA person, because we don't have...
It's a VBA decision.
It would come from a medical opinion provided by a VHA subject matter expert.
Who are these subject matter experts, Brad?
Occupational health specialists.
What, I mean, they can't even spell counsel right. They even got the date of the NRC report wrong. These are guys that died for kidney cancer in November.
I cannot discuss individual cases. I don't know anything about the case. I've not seen it.
I mean, your website's full of erroneous information. I mean, this isn't a mistake. This is deliberate. You're deliberately letting your nose at the science that this agency's done.
I do not agree with that at all. But,
well, that's the way the Marines feel. And that's what the Marines report back to us.
I would be glad to take back anything you have and take a look at it, and I'll...
Well, I was going to get it.
To quote the website, though, it states that the report concludes that available scientific evidence does not provide sufficient basis to determine if the population of Camp Lejeune suffered adverse health effects as a result of exposure to contaminants in the water supply. You can't get any further black and white than that, Brad.
And, Brad, and it always goes back to the National Research Council's 2009 report. That's always what everything closes with. But the National Research Council's published a report, and then down here you said the report concludes that available scientific evidence does not provide sufficient basis to determine if the population of Camp Lejeune suffered adverse health effects as a result of exposure to contaminants in the water supply. How much science has come out since 2009, Brad?
I definitely agree. The NRC report should not be cited for anything in our decisions. I've had discussions with VHA about that. I'll have further discussions with them. We may need to do the training for the SMEs.
Who's in charge over there now?
Dr. Gerald Cross.
Who?
Dr. Gerald Cross.
this language about the 2009 NRC report is appearing, in recent decisions. It's on the website right here. The scientific studies show some evidence of an increased risk of kidney cancer in workers exposed to high levels of TC over many years. High-level benzene exposure is associated with an increased risk of leukemia. Next paragraph. In 2009, a National Research Council published a report. I'll stop there. Two things. It was a review of the literature. It was not a scientific study, but yet the VA holds it with the same degree and awe as a scientific study. The NRC report was addressed by letter by then Director of ATSDR, Dr. Portier, discussing the flaws, the shortcomings, and the fact that there was a hazard at Camp Lejeune. Okay. Other scientists and epidemiologists, Dr. Clapp and several others, wrote a letter rebutting parts of the NRC report. Dr. Clapp was also a peer reviewer of the NRC report, whose comments were disregarded because the peer review coordinator for the NRC report happened to be, was Ridgeon? Who was it? The peer review coordinator for the NRC report.
No, that was Dr. George Rush of Honeywell Limited, who is running a close second with DOD for the most NPL sites in North America for TCE, for trichlorid.
Now, all last year we discussed this yesterday with Dr. Bricey. The CAP asked for the leadership of ATSDR to put together the interpretations of the four scientific studies that have come out. As you know, science is not a eureka moment where everything is discovered in one sudden blinding flash of insight. It's a process. The things that I'm seeing in these denial letters to the veterans is a consistent referral to the NRC report, a complete disregard to the EPA's work declaring TC a human carcinogen, a complete disregard to IARC's finding as TC is a human carcinogen, a complete disregard of ATSDR's scientific findings that have been peer-reviewed, as Jerry pointed out. You guys aren't talking about it, you aren't acknowledging it, and you're ignoring it. And these veterans are being told, oh, you got cancer because you're obese, or you smoked. Okay? And a sidebar, I want to say maybe in May of last year, I was talking to you about the health slide presentation that Dr. Walters had put together, and we discussed ATSDR's work. And at that time, I was frustrated with the leadership at ATSDR because they weren't coming out and telling the VA, this is what our science meant. And you made the comment to me that, well, our people don't agree with ATSDR.
I never said that.
Oh, you said that. Okay.
Never said that.
Okay.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
This is Sharon Mesa, and I just dialed in, and I thought I was dialing into the live stream, and it sounds like a totally different meeting going on. Am I in the wrong place?
What meeting are you dialing into?
It's supposed to be for the Camp Lejeune.
This is it. You're in the right meeting.
Okay, then why am I watching it on TV and it's not even matching up at all? It's supposed to be live streaming.
There's a delay between the audio and
big?
the video, if you say so. But what agency are you representing?
Mitchell, just Mitchell, her mother, she's a concerned individual. Her mother got breast cancer, and she believes that it's from the contamination. Sharon, I got your request this morning.
Did you? I see now. It all caught up. I'm sorry that I interrupted. I totally apologize.
No, welcome to the show. Sharon, nice. Nice.
Phone number's not on the website.
I'd like to come back to make sure we've finished the recaps relative to Brad. Have you had a chance to respond to everything?
Yeah, we'll take all your concerns back and discuss them with VHA, and I'll let you know what.
So I mean, we had the two denials that I just gave you. former Marines, veterans, were both proven to have been at Camp Lejeune during, and both of them were during the peak exposure period. Both of them have kidney cancer, and both of them were denied. And the fact that they were exposed to a carcinogen that is specifically declared a carcinogen for kidney cancer isn't even mentioned in their denial. They're obese, or they smoked, or they're male. Really? You gave me one? There's two there. There's two? Separate sheets. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, they don't even mention that they were exposed to a chemical agent that's been declared a known human carcinogen based upon its causing kidney cancer. I mean, the EPA stuff isn't even mentioned on your website.
I'll look at that. It should be, certainly. And there's no question we can do better in a number of cases. I don't know. I will take these back. I will look at them, have them looked at.
But Brad, we shouldn't be doing this on a case-by-case basis. This drives me nuts. You know how much time it takes for me? I mean, I'm on the phone or on the computer constantly trying to find out why. We shouldn't have to be hand-delivered this stuff. Your people don't have the information. And it was done purposely. You look at that training PowerPoint that Walter's put together, I wouldn't even want to call her a doctor, okay? She doesn't meet the criteria.
Sorry, that PowerPoint has nothing to do with compensation. That's totally for healthcare.
Hey, Jim, this is Jeremy.
Excuse me.
I want to say thank you for your efforts. Everything you were saying is absolutely 100% true, and I just found out about the nurse of years.
I'm sorry, to our guests on the phone, we're going to have to ask you to go on mute during this time.
Is there going to be a time, because I would like to talk with him and his effort.
We're going to need to coordinate that offline.
Thank you.
And you have your phone number, Tim? Okay. But Brad, the language that is part of that PowerPoint is showing up. The rationale that is encapsulated in that PowerPoint that Dr. Walters presented is showing up in these decisions here. I've got two male breast cancer decisions that are citing obesity. One guy, if he's obese, maybe his BMI is over 30, but the guy's a beanpole. Yeah, he's over his 50s, and I think his late 50s was diagnosed. I'm sure he's got his huge belly for being that. But if obesity, if we're looking at the VA decisions, and with male breast cancer, I see obesity showing up everywhere. Well, where's the epidemic that the VA health examiners are seeing here with obesity and male breast cancer? I mean, hell, everybody should be going out and getting testing for male breast cancer. Obesity is the prime indicator of male breast cancer. Now, another thing I asked you about, I sent several emails and we talked about it, is there is a disparity between the awards given for male breast cancer at 24% and female breast cancer, I believe at 74 or 77%, with the same number of cases.
I can address that later and cut some information on that.
Okay, I propose, I think we got some time for a detailed discussion of the VA in a little bit. Is it safe to assume that the action items that started this discussion are still action items?
Yes, because there's nobody here who we asked specifically for somebody from VHA to be present at these meetings. And, well, you see, they're not here.
So we can carry those forward, and we can, I know we're going to be talking to the VA, and we'll explore these issues as well. But I think it's safe to say that from the CAS perspective, the action items have not been.
But we'll have more opportunities to ask questions to Brad later, right?
Yeah, there's a session on the agenda that's, I think, for detailed exploration. Brad?
Well, I got an action item that you need to put on the chart. Does the Veterans Administration accept ATSDRs outside their work?
If you're on the phone, we ask that you would mute your line.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can just turn every speaker.
If you're on the phone, Sharon is your name?
do that?
You need to hang up and send Tim an email with your phone number, and he will call you during our next break.
Here's what we should do. Let's just take this phone number offline, and then if we can,
I believe that was me. I apologize. I was trying to turn the TV down and it went the other way because I had the meeting on live.
Well, we want you to hang up and we want you to send Tim an email with your phone number, and he'll call you during our first break, okay?
Oh, okay. I don't have Tim's email.
What's your phone number?
you don't want to do that because it's
No. Yeah, this is being broadcast. It's camplejeune@gmail.com.
I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
CampLejeune@gmail.com.
Camp Lejeune Cat. Thank you.
@gmail.com. And then hang up your phone, okay?
We're going to do it.
So we can hear everything that's going on over there, including
thank you,
Sherry.
Oh, Lord, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Here on the streets, what's going on?
Quickly go through the mail or something. We'll put the phone back. We'll just move on to, we have 2 more action items to cover. The next action item, the CAP requested that ATSDR update the website for TCE with the most current information. And the updated TCE profile and tax facts was released last month and posted on the website. And I'll just echo what Dr. Bricey said yesterday. If the CAP noticed anything with the website or have any concerns, to let us know. We'll take care of that as soon as possible. In the interest of time, we'll just move on. The CAP requested a formal meeting with Dr. Frieden. And our CAP coordinator, Sheila Stevens, took care of the logistics. And we had a very fruitful pre-meeting discussion yesterday. Dr. Frieden did join us at the meeting and talk with the CAP. The next action item, I propose that we, because in the interest of time, we can discuss a little bit more at the end of the meeting. The CAP wants ATSDR to start planning a meeting in North Carolina in a centrally located area. And we did discuss this yesterday, but I think in the interest of time, we can move it to the end of the agenda. Would that be okay with everyone?
Great. Thank you. So we're a little bit off schedule here. We're about a half an hour behind. The question for the CAP is, would you like to take a break now and then come back for the updates? So let's take a 10-minute break, come back at 10:15, and we'll re-engage. I mentioned at the beginning. Number 1, please make sure you remember to sign in on the guest register at some point today, perhaps at our next break or when we break for lunch, so we have a record of everyone who's attended. And also, just a reminder, when you're speaking to the microphone, please make sure you get your face within a couple of inches of it. Sometimes if we're far away, we can't be heard. And as everyone's taking their seats, we're now ready to transition to a series of updates on the various health studies. Harry, will you make the comments at the beginning? Oh, sorry. Yes, Rick. The soil vapor intrusion update first, starting with Rick. Mike.
Okay, this morning, my name is Rick Gillen, by the way. This morning we had 2 updates. We've got 2 projects within the division that we've talked about over the last couple of CAP meetings. One is the project on reevaluating drinking water exposures, and also the project to look at exposures as a result of soil vapor intrusion. So I'll be presenting first, and my focus will be on the reevaluation of drinking water exposures. When I'm finished, I'll take questions, and then Commander Fletcher will present on the soil vapor intrusion project. So, as we've discussed before, our reevaluation of drinking water exposures, we're looking at exposures that result from drinking, from showering. We're looking at exposures from use of swimming pools, both marines in training and also recreational use. We know that the swimming pool that was used, the indoor swimming pool that was used for providing aquatic training for Marines, was used for recreational use after hours and on weekends. Thanks to your input, we're also looking at laundry workers. We know that there were several laundry facilities on base, and those laundry facilities used drinking water that was contaminated. So you had people washing laundry. You also had people operating steam presses. We're looking at those exposures. We're also looking at food preparation and dishwashers. The mess halls, we had people standing over serving lines. We had people cooking and also people washing dishes. So we're looking at those exposures as well. Now, as we discussed in all of our presentations, we're taking a conservative approach to estimate exposures. We're looking at maximum contaminant concentrations. We are using the information, the modeling results that Horace Massillon and his staff developed, and we are incorporating that information into our reevaluation of drinking water exposures. And Jerry, I see that you have a question.
On your list of high exposures, you have the food prep and the people, laundry workers. You also need to add healthcare people at the hospitals and the clinics, because these people were constantly washing their hands. They were high usage of water, high exposure.
And I believe, Rob, you know best, but I believe we've accounted for frequent hand washing.
Yeah, Mark's evaluation.
Okay, and I should introduce the operator of the slides, Rob Robinson. He is one of the lead health assessors on the development of this public health assessment. And you know, as we get together every quarter, we provide updates on the progress of these projects. We've discussed over the last couple of meetings about developing some models to help us with our evaluation of exposures. We've developed those models. Those models, we're looking at showering. We're looking at exposures resulting in training in those indoor swimming pools. We're looking at swimming exposures. And we're also looking at workers in the mess halls and the laundry facilities. Those models were developed by staff that work with Horace, and one of our monitors, Jason Sauber, is here in the audience. As I had mentioned, we're incorporating the model results into our public health evaluation. And we're currently readying the public health assessment for release, for review, or for release, for peer review release. It'll go through the ATSDR clearance process. We've had within the branch, so several issues are currently being addressed, and that document should be put into the peer review process. I guess I'm jumping ahead on my slides here. If you could go, okay. So we developed a draft document. We've done quite a bit of review on that. We expect to begin the peer review process in the winter of 2015. And the CAP will be one of the peer reviewers for that document. And then we expect to release the document for public comment late spring of 2015. Any questions on our development of the public health assessment looking at drinking water exposures? If not, Chris, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Good morning. I'll provide a brief update on some of the changes and progress we've made with document review since our last CAP meeting. Next slide, please. So currently, we're finalizing all the sub-indices. As I've discussed in previous meetings, we're creating a document index for each subgroup of data. So in other words, as you see on the slide, each subgroup from the Department of Navy and U.S. Marine Corps will have its own index of all the documents we have from those sources, as well as an index for the EPA documents, those that we found with the state at in North Carolina DENR, the documents we're using from ATSDR, basically stuff from Morris and the water modeling, as well as the documents you've provided. Next slide, please. So the final product of that we'll have a master index and then all sub-indices, all within an Excel spreadsheet. So those of you that are familiar with Excel, you know that it's got different worksheets or tabs at the bottom of the master index and then a sub-index for each subsource. That's because each subsource has, there's a lot of various information included from different sources about the documents they have. Not all of those match up with other sources, so what you can see here on the slide, the data columns that do match that we found from every source are file name, document title, file name is the PDF, the actual electronic file name, document title, date, author, notes, those do match up. So next slide, please. You can see here, this is a screenshot of kind of the top, the way it's looking right now. This is still in draft, and we're, like I said, we're finalizing all this. So you can see how the master index will look. We've got the file names, again, that's the electronic file, document title, and date. But what we're doing with this, as you see kind of on the bottom of the two images there, the bottom right, a column for EPA and a column for ATSDR. Next slide, please. Let's continue out to the right. So this is a rather wide spreadsheet. What we'll do with these columns is just simply put a check mark under each of the sources where the document is also found. Actually, no, I'm not going to put a check mark. I'm going to take that back. We'll put the file name. So as we've gone through all these tens of thousands of files, we found that many files are identical, but have different file names or document titles as they were stored in different sets of data. So to help everyone understand how to help everyone compare files to files, we'll have the file name that we use in the left column, so in our file name column, but then we'll put the file name as found in other data sources beneath those data source titles. So now that's a mouthful. Next slide, please. So the next steps we have are to, again, complete the file index, and we're going to ensure that there's a one-to-one match with files to file title on the master index. What we really want to be able to guarantee is that if you're looking for a file, you can find it, no doubt. We really don't want any holes to be in this at all. It won't do anyone any good. Following that, we'll do the keyword search. So when we shared the list with you guys in November, with the CAT that is, in November last year, we had 172 keywords. Since then, I've been wrapping up some emails that came in towards the end of the year last year, and I think we've added another 8 or 10 keywords, so we're a little over 180 or right at 180 keywords. We didn't get any feedback from the CAP on that as far as whether or not you liked the keywords we had, or if there was anything additional you wanted us to add to that. Is there anything you guys wanted to mention in this forum? Okay, so we'll do each keyword search with the final list of PDFs where we're going to do our best to remove all the duplicates, so it'll be as small a group of documents as we can get it. Each keyword search will give us a list of documents where that keyword was identified, and at that point we'll have a person go through and open manually each document, verify whether there's data or not to be extracted, and then eventually extract that data. Once the data is extracted, we'll load that into a database, and at that point we'll be able to do our normal summary statistics and data analysis and move forward at that point. Next slide. So that's pretty much it for me for the update. So to kind of relay this back to the discussion earlier about the relational database, what we've done is gone through more than 60,000 document titles at this point. We've requested documents of interest based on that review and have, I think, more than 30,000 actual electronic files. What's taking so long is, like I alluded to earlier with the master index, many of these files have the same file name. In some cases they don't, but they're still identical files. So we've been opening each of these files, comparing them to each other, and then doing our best to remove duplicates so that it makes keyword searching and data extraction go as quickly as possible by having as few documents as possible to extract data from. So once we're done extracting the data and we enter that into the SQL Server database that we'll use, at that point we more or less have a relational database. It'll be searchable by date and site ID and some of the things that I mentioned in last fall's CAT meeting. So we're on the way to that at ATSDR already.
Just one question and a little brief history for Dr. Pricey. We had references in a report that was issued in May of 1988 from a Department of Navy contractor, Environmental Science and Engineering, who did the RIFS, Remedial Investigation Feasibility Study for Camp Lejeune, and they recommended that until the contamination sites are totally remediated, they had precautionary measures which needed to take place and be undertaken to alleviate any further human exposures from the contaminants. One of those was doing underground workspace and ambient air quality sampling indoors over buildings that were located above these plumes. We have documents that show where the Department of Navy and Camp Lejeune officials announced to the public in court-recorded documents of meeting minutes where they've accepted those and actually announced that they were going to conduct those samples. We have a paper trail of letters going from Camp Lejeune's Assistant Chief of Staff of Facilities to the Navy Facilities Engineering Command asking for funds to contract that air quality sampling to be done. That was in October of 1988. That's the end of the trail. ATSDR requested those documents because they're not anywhere in the files. The paper trail ended there. And they got a negative response. So my question is, are you guys putting some kind of disclaimer in here where you've asked for these documents that are evidenced in the record to protect the agency?
I do have emails saved where we sent a request in writing and it's come back in writing with the Navy's response. So, which is the response, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is just because the existence, just because we don't have the documents doesn't mean the testing didn't happen or not. I think their response is something to that effect. Yeah, their response is what they give us. We'll include it in our document, but.
Okay, good. I mean, you got to cover yourself.
Chris, can I suggest that if there's a citation for a document in a report or something, you put it in the database as a title. If you're doing this great,
it's where we are.
And then you just put, that's where then you document, ask for it, we're given it. So we know that there's a document, we just haven't found it yet. So I don't want to lose track of that trail that ends. Because those documents might appear somewhere in some other place, but we'd like to have a list of all that stuff and at least some documentation in a database that we asked for it and it wasn't available.
And we are gathering that as well as even when the Navy says they can't find it or whatever happened to it, we still intend to use those document titles as a keyword search term. So we're still going to search for it and see what we can find.
And in all fairness to Chris and Rick, I mean, they did diligently go after to get these documents and try to ferret out where they may be. But as with, a lot of the key documentation with Camp Lejeune, once you drill down to that point where you can get, oh, Eureka, here it is, it's gone. Another example is the well logbooks that show that Morris had to fight this with his water model. The actual well logbooks from Camp Lejeune for the contaminated wells mysteriously disappeared and never were found.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't mean to in any way suggest Oh, no, I wouldn't take it. I just, credit for doing their job. I just want to understand myself. And, but yeah, that's something we've been fighting, and it goes back to that Sphinx comment that I made earlier this morning. If you don't ask the right question in the right manner at the proper celestial alignment, you're not get the answer. And there's been several examples. Probably the classic one was Senators Burr and Hagan asking the Navy how much fuel they lost. Well, the answer back from the Navy was, well, according to our inventory records, we lost 30 to 50,000 gallons of fuel. Period. Nothing more. Then we found out, oh, it's 1.5 million gallons of fuel. But we didn't ask the correct question. And the answer, according to the caveat, was according to our inventory records. And like with the well log books that Morris had to go through trying to do the water model, I've got well log books from Camp Geiger that go back to the 1950s. That was given to me by our water treatment plant operator. So why are those books in existence but not the critical ones that we need? And that's been one of the hard issues that we've been fighting the Navy and the Marine Corps with the documentation so you guys can do your job. Because without these readings, without these samplings, without the well log books, it handcuffs y'all's efforts to get the truth out.
Well, everything and anything that goes to the Department of the Navy as far as requests or for information or anything pertaining to Camp Lejeune water, it goes through a platoon of lawyers. And they gin up their lawyerese responses for headquarters, and then that's what you get back.
And I want to say that, this is where I think our work is so important, not just because of Camp Lejeune, but to set standards, because right now in Red Hill, Hawaii, the Department of Navy is refusing to take care of the tanks in those huge tanks at Red Hill. And they're fighting with the local health department who is saying, no, you need to do this. And the Department of Navy is saying, well, we don't think we need to. And they're saying, oh, we don't really know. We lost this much inventory of fuel, and we know it got into the ground. But everybody knows, all these scientists are fighting on their own, trying to say, well, no, you don't know that's how much fuel you lost. And if they lose their drinking water supply on that island, that's gone. I mean, if that's contaminated, and that's in the shadow of Pearl Harbor, and that's happening right now. And that's off the radar, but I guarantee you it won't be for long. So what we do now is really important for other people to have some ground to stand on when they want to say to the Department of Navy, no, you don't get to decide what's safe and not. Of the people who are going to have bad drinking water in Hawaii have a say as well. So I think it's really important.
But that's only Oahu, is a small island.
True.
I'm sure the Department of Navy would like them to move everybody off of Oahu and let them have it,
They can play golf. Just don't sprinkle the...
Any final questions for Rick? Yeah, I have a question. So both of these are historical. Clearly the VAPOR is a historical database, and the public health assessment, I assume, is historical, re-looking at the historical exposures that might have occurred. So this raises the issue whether, when this is all said and done, there'll be a reevaluation of the exposures for mortality study, first of all, and second of all, for the oncoming incidence study.
And we are looking at both historical and more current exposures, so we want to cover both time periods.
So presumably these will be fit into a revamped exposure assessment for those two studies, or whatever other studies might occur.
Yeah, as far as how
I see Frank is kind of.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, as far as how the health assessments are used to support study activities, I would turn to my colleagues in the health studies program for an answer on that.
I don't expect the drinking water exposure estimates to change. You're basing them on Morris's model. Right. So no,
we're still going to base the mortality and cancer incidence studies on the drinking water exposures. The cohort that we're following is based on that as well. So we're not basing it on vapor intrusion for a couple of reasons. One, we don't know who were in those buildings. In fact, we really don't know how long people worked at the base. The civilian mortality study had a long discussion with our point of contact at the Marine Corps a couple of days ago, because they were saying that we meaning the other division now, was trying to use the civilian mortality study to determine how long people worked at the base. You can't do that because it's truncated, the cohort's truncated, so you really can't get it. The only reason that data is in the civilian mortality study is to compare it to Pendleton to show that there's similarities between the two bases. If you really want to know how long, who was in these buildings and how long they were, you're going to have to, as I said to the Marine Corps guy, you're going to have to talk to the people who actually worked in those buildings. There is no data, as far as I know, on who worked in those buildings and how long they worked there, right? And so we can't really incorporate that into our study, and I don't think there's going to be that many people exposed in terms of enough to study. There are enough people for health effects and so on. I'm not trying to diminish that. I'm just saying it won't be enough for us to do either a separate study or at least I don't think there will be enough. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't know. We really don't know how many workers in those buildings that had the vapor intrusion. So is that answer, or do you have?
I think it does. And then, so there presumably was not either no data or minimal exposure in the housing to the vapor intrusion. Is that correct?
No, this is your job.
Turn that over to my colleagues.
Okay. At this point, I don't think I can say, but we've got a lot of data to go through, and a lot of analysis still needs to be done. So I don't want to speculate, but given that a lot of the contamination was close to the fuel farm, and most of those buildings were warehouses and such, it's probably very limited in residential areas.
There was only one housing area that actually had a physical plume, and that was Terrace.
Right, and I don't think that the vapor intrusion, I think the vapor intrusion would be dwarfed by the drinking water exposure. So I don't think it would add that much more to the exposure they got from the drinking water itself. You were talking about 215 parts per billion PCE measured, and the average monthly got up to at least 170, 180, right, Morris? I can't remember exactly how high.
At Terrace?
Yeah, the monthly max.
The monthly modeling max was 183.
Yeah, 170, 180, yeah. So I think that would dwarf the vapor intrusion, any vapor intrusion in Terrace. Would I agree? Yeah.
Excellent. Any final questions? Okay.
Well,
please.
Morris, just what you just said, I guess I'm trying to hear it.
Okay. I'm Morris Masley. I'm with the Division of Community Health Investigations. And along with our staff, conducted the water modeling that was published in 2013. I believe the question was from someone, what was the maximum reconstructed drinking water concentration at Terrace? And my answer was 183 micrograms per liter, and you can find that in the Terrace Chapter A report, either on graphs or in the appendix listing month by month, which is on the ATSDR website.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We're ready to transition to Perry for updates on the health studies.
Hey everybody, just a few quick updates on our health studies that are still in progress.
We have the male breast cancer study. So we received and responded to the peer reviewer comments. We have 4 sets of those, and the revised manuscript and responses are currently being reviewed by the agency. For the health survey, we're currently analyzing the data, keeping in mind that there's numerous outcomes, and we have the 2 populations, 3 populations, the Marines, the civilians, and the dependents. That's a pretty large effort. And our cancer incidence protocol, a draft protocol, was sent out for review to the expert panel that we met with this summer and to our peer reviewers. And we asked to receive their comments by the end of this month. We've already received 1 or 2. Any questions about that? Okay, moving along, I just wanted to discuss with you the results of our adverse pregnancy outcome study. It was published in November in the Journal of Environmental Health, and you can see its formal long title there. Okay. So the purpose of this study was to determine if maternal exposures to the contaminated drinking water at the base were associated with preterm birth, small for gestational age, reduced mean birth weight, and term low birth weight. And in a few slides here, I'll get into what we mean by those and further define those outcomes. This study is a reanalysis of a previous study which incorrectly categorized as unexposed some maternal exposures before June 1972. That was based on the information available at the time. So that's one reason we wanted to reanalyze the study, and additionally, we wanted to reanalyze it because now we have the estimated levels from the water modeling. The previous study just used exposed yes, no. And just to let you know, we used the birth certificate information and housing information from the original study. We didn't collect any new information on the births. It was just the exposure assessment that was different. So I'm going to quickly review the background on the drinking water contamination. I know that mostly everybody here is familiar, but in case there's some new people viewing the streaming. So there are 3 water distribution systems that serve most of the base housing. Those were Hadnut Point, Terra Terrace, and Holcomb Boulevard. And volatile organic compounds, VOCs, were detected in some wells in 2 of the systems, Hadnut Point and Terra Terrace, during the base's sampling program in the 1980s. So Hadnut Point started operations in 1943. It was mainly contaminated with TCE from leaking underground storage tanks, industrial air spills, and waste disposal practices. Vinyl chloride and DCE were also present in the water when TCE degraded, and PCE and benzene were also found. The maximum amount of TCE detected in the distribution system was 1,400 parts per billion in May 1982. Now, Hadnut Point served the Mainside Barracks and Hospital Point family housing areas. Prior to 1972, it also served family housing at Midway Park, Paradise Point, and Berkeley Manor. So Terra Terrace began operations in 1952. It was mainly contaminated with PCE from an off-site dry cleaner, and the major supply well for Terra Terrace was about 900 feet from the dry cleaner septic tank. The maximum amount of PCE detected in the distribution system was 215 parts per billion in February 1985. And TCE, DCE, and vinyl chloride were also present in the system due to degradation of PCE. Terra Terrace served the Terra Terrace family housing areas, and it partially served Knox Trailer Park. I just want to let you know, if you have any questions, you can just stop me at any time. That's fine. So I mentioned there was a third system. I'm sorry, skipping ahead here. So a little bit about how the contamination happened in these systems. Each system had many more wells than were necessary to supply water on any given day. So wells were rotated in and out of service, and water from all the wells was mixed before treatment and distribution. So the contamination levels in the drinking water distribution system varied depending on which wells were being used. And the most contaminated wells at Hadnut Point and Terra Terrace were shut down by February 1985. So So I mentioned there was a third system that supplied water to base housing. That was Holcomb Boulevard. And Holcomb Boulevard served family housing at Midway Park, Paradise Point, and Berkeley Manor when it began operations in June 1972. It also served Watkins Village when it was constructed in the late 70s, and Taro Terrace family housing after March 1987. So as previously mentioned, prior to June 1972, Midway Park, Paradise Point, and Berkeley Manor were served by Hadnot Point. And the Holcomb Boulevard system was generally uncontaminated, except when the Hadnot Point supplemented Holcomb Boulevard during high demand in dry spring and summer months, and also during a 10-day period in early 1985 when the system was shut down for repairs.
I have a question. I keep finding, when I research, I keep finding different answers on how often that happened with the Hadnot Point was put.
The intermittent transfer of water.
Yeah. Do we have any hard facts on that?
I'm going to let Mara speak to that. If you want to come up to the microphone.
So I've introduced myself previously. I won't do that again. We spent quite an amount of effort and time when we were doing the water modeling. If you go, I'll tell you where to find it, and I'll go into an explanation just so we have it. Go to the at that point Holcomb Boulevard Chapter A report. There's a section on intermittent water transfers, and we had I know Jason's here or not. He did, and Renee, as far as also looked through all the files that we were provided, and we found times when there's a booster pump, I think it's 720, that was located along the pipeline between Hadnot Point and Holcomb Boulevard, that they would intermittently turn that on and off. And then there was also a valve at Marston Pavilion on the other side of the creek, that they would also turn that on and off. And then we were able, from the information and data to gather that's in the report, and I can't pull it off my head, but it varied from sometimes 4 incidences per month to maybe 8, and the data is in there. Where we were missing information, which was sometimes a substantial block of time, that's where we relied on our university partner, and we used some probabilistic methods, Markov methods, in there, again explained in the text of the report, to estimate the number of times during the period when they are missing. And all those are in a table in the report that tell you exactly how many times per month during this period of 1972 through 1985 that transfers were made.
So would you say that since you started your research that you found that it happened, it seems to me that we're finding that it happened more than we may have originally thought. Like it seems to, would that be a fair assessment?
Let me answer it in a slightly different manner, because from a scientific investigation, you try to go in objectively, not trying to think how many times it was or was not, let the data speak for itself.
Right.
Okay. But for those who were here when we had the first expert panel meeting, we specifically asked that question from utility operators and all of that. And that is part of what elongated the process, and the answer came back that there was never any interconnection. Okay. As we started looking through the data and talking with them more and more, and actually talking to the operators, we mentioned or asked the question, because hydraulically it was not possible never to open up that pump. There's a huge pump in there, and it was there for a reason. And we knew also that Camp Lejeune, their method of operation was to keep all the storage tanks full. They would never let them drop below a foot because of fire protection. So that they had to have water from some place where they were running low. And it turns out that when we were discussing about transferring water, then we obtained firsthand information. Well, yeah, they would operate it so many hours a day during the dry spring and summer months to compensate, say, for filling swimming pools at Holcomb Boulevard or watering the lawns and the golf course and things of that nature. And so they would turn that booster pump on. And so that's how we did it. But again, there are periods that you'll see in the report where there's just, as throughout this whole process, it's an iterative process, there's missing information. And so we went to some alternative or novel methods. In this case, was a probabilistic method to estimate when we did not have the information. And so I don't want to cite off the top of my head because I really I'd rather refer to the table, but the table will tell you how many times per month for the period of record that there were transfers going in. And it also gives you a step-by-step calculation in our rationale for how many hours the pump was operated.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. The Holcomb Boulevard system, when it was originally created, only had 8 wells. So until it was expanded. And that expansion wasn't completed until March of 1987. It wasn't until July of 1987 that they finally got smart and quit using treated water to irrigate the golf course with. They drilled a well by one of the water hazards, and they were pumping water out of that well into the hazard, and they were pumping the water to irrigate the courses. Then, after July of 87, they were pumping that water out of the hazards to irrigate the courses.
And as former juvenile delinquent who used to steal golf carts at that golf course and ride around in the sprinklers, they use a lot of water in that golf course.
Well, there's 2 of them.
I'm talking about the
There's two championship courses there.
Right.
You got the Scarlet and the Gold course.
But the whole incident about the transfer pump was an example of, yet another example of asking the snakes the correct question in the right manner. And it all started out with the first statements by the Marine Corps saying that other than the January 1985 incident, we never used that transfer valve.
That was Mac Frizzell.
Yeah. And that was the directors of utilities and what have you that were saying that to ATSDR. Then Jerry and I found references about this booster pump that we brought to Morse's attention. Then they started digging, and then lo and behold, when we started talking to the people, or they started talking to the people who operated the plants, then we found out that this was indeed occurring at a more frequent rate.
But that booster pump was located at the corner of Holcomb Boulevard and Sneeds Ferry Road. It was right there in that little grassy area right by the edge of the woods. I remember taking the Washington Post reporter in there, and this thing was, at that time, this was in 2003. The roof was caved in. I mean, the thing was an eyesore. I specifically pointed it out to him. I said, why the heck would they be letting that thing sit there? Next time I went in there, it was a bare dirt space. That's where that pump was located.
Speaking of bare dirt, that made me remember one other thing I wanted to say. As we've talked a lot about the Torah Terrace School, my concern about making sure there's no children still being exposed through vapor intrusion. There's a Marine named John Olin who's been helping me, and he has, I think we may have better information on the location of the old school, and he has gone back in the Wayback Machine on Google Earth, and so I have some stuff I just want to give you to take a look at before I go. Email or just show you or whatever. I just don't want to forget that.
Olin was a dependent, he wasn't a Marine. John Olin.
Oh, sorry, you're right. But he's involved with the issue. He was a dependent. He went to the former daycare center that was a toxic toxic playground.
Okay, then I just want to briefly go over the methods used in this study. We cross-referenced birth certificate data from Onslow County, that's where Camp Lejeune is located, with the Camp Lejeune housing records, and we identified 11,896 live singleton births who were 28 to 47 weeks gestation and who weighed at least 500 grams during 1968 to 1985 to mothers who lived at Camp Lejeune at delivery. 500 grams, just so you know, is about 1.2 pounds. And we started the study in 1968 because that's when North Carolina began computerizing their birth certificate data. And this is a data linkage study that did not involve contact with participants. We just used available data. And the outcomes that we looked at: preterm birth, that is being born before 37 weeks of pregnancy, small for gestational age, babies who are smaller in size than normal for their gestational age of their week of pregnancy, commonly defined as the 10th percentile, weight below the 10th percentile for their gestational age, reduced mean birth weight, lower average birth weight among a group of live births. So in this study, we compared the average birth weight among full-term births at Camp Lejeune who were exposed to the contaminated drinking water to full-term births at Camp Lejeune who were unexposed. In term low birth weight, so that's full-term babies who weighed less than 2,500 grams of birth, that's about 5.5 pounds. So as we discussed, there was very little measured data on the contamination, so ATSDR conducted extensive water modeling to reconstruct the past drinking water exposures at the base, and the water unique feature of all of the Camp Lejeune studies. And other studies that evaluated these associations did not have monthly estimate of the contaminated levels of the residents. Am I going in and out with the microphone? You're good. Yeah, John didn't like it.
I thought it was me.
Okay, I guess if I feel like it's going out, I'll speak louder.
I might have been too late.
So to figure out which mothers were exposed and to what levels they were exposed to, we used address information collected from the birth certificates and base family housing records, and we combined those with the water modeling results. We linked each month of pregnancy to the estimated levels of contaminants in the drinking water serving that residence. And we evaluated each trimester separately and the entire pregnancy. And for each of these time periods, births were categorized as unexposed if mothers did not live at Camp Lejeune, if their residents at Camp Lejeune received uncontaminated drinking water, or if the mothers were exposed for less than 1 week during that time period. So I mentioned before that this study was a reanalysis of a previous study, and this slide compares the initial exposure assessment with the current one. And based on the new exposure information, almost 1,200 fewer births were categorized as unexposed. That's the last row of the table. And over 1,300 additional people were categorized as exposed to TCE because they lived at Holcomb Boulevard and received Hadnot Point water before June 1972. So that's the second row there. You see, previously it went from 31 TCE exposed births up to 1,342. And so because of this new information, we were more thoroughly able to evaluate TCE, and we also had a cleaner unexposed group. So just some information about our data analysis. We used unconditional logistic regression and calculated odds ratios for preterm birth, term low birth weight, and small for gestational age. An odds ratio compares the risk or the odds of disease among those who are exposed with the risk among those who are unexposed, and an odds ratio greater than 1 indicates a higher risk of exposure among those exposed compared with the unexposed. And we use linear regression for the mean birth weight difference, and we evaluate that as a continuous variable. We calculated 95% confidence intervals These give us an estimate of how uncertain we are of the actual risk. A wide confidence interval indicates a lot of uncertainty about the risk and that the estimate's not very precise. Using 95% confidence intervals is somewhat arbitrary, but it's what's commonly used in epi studies. And we evaluated risk factors by adding them to the model with the exposure and seeing if including them in the model changed the results. The risk factor data came from the birth certificates, except from rank, which came from the family housing records, and we used that as a surrogate for socioeconomic status. And we used two criteria to interpret the findings: the size of the estimate, how large it is, and exposure-response relationships. And what we mean by that is that the risk of the outcome increases with increasing levels of exposure. The confidence intervals, as I just mentioned, were used just to indicate the precision of the estimates. We did not base our interpretation on statistical significance findings. We analyzed each contaminant separately, and for each contaminant, the unexposed group did not have any residential exposure to the contaminant under consideration. So what I mean by that is, for example, for the PCE analysis, the unexposed group meant that no one had exposure to PCE, but they could have had exposure to another chemical. And we divided the exposure group into 4 levels, and that was using less than the 50th percentile, so less than average, at or above the 50th percentile, at or above the 75th percentile, and at or above the 90th percentile. We did that for all the chemicals except benzene. The numbers were too small, so there we just used 1 part per billion as our cutoff, below that and at or above that. As a sensitivity analysis, when 2 chemicals were independently associated with the outcome, we put them both in the model to see how that would affect things and determine what had the stronger association. So what did we find? For small for gestational age, the odds ratio for TCE in the highest exposure category during the entire pregnancy was 1.5. We did not observe an exposure-response relationship. As you can see, the levels, the odds ratios at the lower levels are changing up and down, but at the highest level, it's 1.5. For preterm birth, we included mother's race in the model, and the odds ratio for the second trimester exposure to the highest category was 1.5, and it was 1.3 for the entire pregnancy. So for term low birth weight, the odds ratio for the second trimester exposure to the highest category of TCE was 1.6, and you can see we observed an exposure-response relationship. So with each increasing level of the exposure, the odds ratio is also increasing. It's fine if it stays flat, like 1.3 to 1.3, but it's not going lower than 1.3. So it can either be flat and then increase, but it never goes lower and then back up. And the odds ratio for the highest category of exposure to benzene was 1.5, and we consider that an exposure-response relationship as well. For mean birth weight and TCE, we included sex of the child, mother's race, and parity in the model, and we found a reduced mean birth weight at the highest level of minus 92.9 grams. And as I mentioned to you, when 2 of the chemicals were both associated with an outcome, we put them in a model to see how that would affect things. So they're both associated with term low, both TCE and benzene were associated with term low birth weight and reduced mean birth weight. We modeled exposures over the entire pregnancy for mean birth weight and the second trimester exposures for term low birth weight because the odds ratios were higher in that trimester compared to the rest of the pregnancy. So for term low birth weight, risks for both contaminants were still increased in this model, but their odds ratios at the highest exposure categories were slightly reduced from when each one was just independently in the model. And for mean birth weight, when both of the contaminants were included in the model, we didn't see any mean benzene, and the mean birth weight deficit for TCE at the highest exposure level did increase. So every study has limitations, so just mention what we see here. We were unable to include births to women who were pregnant at Camp Lejeune but who delivered off base. We just were going by the birth certificate data that we had. We did not conduct interviews to obtain more detailed information on residential history or other maternal characteristics. Just want to let you know, though, in order for any risk factor to have a confounding impact on the findings, it needs to be strongly associated with the exposure. Also, since drinking water exposures could have occurred all over the base, some mothers categorized as unexposed may have had some drinking water exposure just during their daily activities.
So, Perry, I have a question about this. Specifically, my mom likes to tell the story about when I was born in 1974 at the base, and I was born at the base hospital, and the naval doctors screamed at her, no, go to Jacksonville, and she would tell stories all the time about how the Navy did not want children born on base. They wanted them born in Jacksonville.
I'll actually clarify. Born on base, I mean the mother lived on base when she had the baby. The baby could have been born in the county at the hospital, but the mother had to reside on the base. So what I mean is if the mother was living at Camp Lejeune at some point during the pregnancy but transferred out of North Carolina, she wasn't living on the base, they weren't included. But those births at the county hospital were included. So just to summarize, maternal exposure to PCE was associated with preterm birth, that's births born before 37 weeks of pregnancy, and the strongest association was seen during the second trimester. Maternal exposure to TCE was associated with small for gestational age, term low birth weight, and reduced mean birth weight. The risk of term low birth weight increased with increasing levels of exposure to TCE during the second trimester. This finding is for term low birth weight is consistent with a study in New Jersey. They found an odds ratio of 1.23 and we found 1.6. The finding for SGA, small for gestational age, is consistent with findings from a previous study in Woburn, Massachusetts. That study found an association for small for gestational age and maternal exposure to TCE contaminated drinking water in the third trimester. That study had an odds ratio of 1.6 and we found one of 1.5. Maternal exposure to benzene was also associated with term low birth weight, and we did see an exposure-response relationship with the increasing odds ratio with increasing levels. These effects were seen in births during 1968 to 1985 to mothers who were exposed to the contaminated water while they were living on base. As mentioned, we could only start the study in 1968 because of the availability of the birth certificate data, but we feel that these results would apply to all mothers who were exposed to similar levels if they were living at Camp Lejeune during their pregnancy. We did not find any evidence suggesting any other associations between the outcomes and chemicals that we were analyzing here. So, because not many studies have evaluated maternal exposures to these chemicals in drinking water and adverse pregnancy outcomes, the studies that are out there are limited and inconsistent. We feel that these results add to the literature and just shed some more light on what's happening. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, this is Tim. I do have a question. Now, I just want to, it may sound like I'm dumbing it down here, but this is, what you show here is a exposure response relationship. We can derive from this an exposure response.
For some of the chemicals.
Correct. Yes.
And outcomes.
Correct. I want to make sure Mr. Floor takes this back to the other folks in VA because there's been several denials that I've seen that say that there is no exposure response relationship. Here it is. I want to earmark this. I want to underscore it. I want to make sure that this gets back to them because I've seen that phrase used a lot, and it's right here.
I really want to say thank you again for this work. I wish my mother had lived to see the science because she, and like many women, blame themselves when they have something go wrong with their pregnancy. And I also want to say that, I have a lot of hope in the future with our new working relationship. And I think this is a really good example of where we need to, corporate America is even starting to talk in terms of using narratives and storytelling. And I think this is where we need to put that to work and make sure that women, when they hear the story of Camp Lejeune, that they can really understand what women were put at risk for, because every woman feels so strongly about their pregnancy and their baby being safe. And if they connect to themselves that just by drinking water, they put their babies at risk, I think it will increase awareness and it will help us gain advocacy in the civilian community. So thank you for the work very much. It means a lot.
Any final questions? Perry, any updates on any other health studies to share today?
We started with that.
Good. All right, we're ready to transition to the VA updates, and we're going to take just a moment to re-engage the phone line to see if our guests will join us.
Welcome to the conference. Your passcode has been confirmed. If you need technical assistance during your call, press *0. You are the first caller to this conference. Please wait while others join.
Okay, Brett.
I'm always on my own mic. We were asked by the CAP and by Senate staff to do a study on breast cancer, both female and male breast cancer, based on reported results in claims. So we have done that. We have not yet drafted the report to send over to the Senate staff. We'll have that next week. We did complete the review, and we started by going into our database. We have a unique diagnostic code for breast cancer. We also, if someone claims breast cancer or something related to breast cancer, we use a hyphenated diagnostic code with a build-up diagnostic code followed by the code for breast cancer. So we asked our database and asked our data staff to pull all of those cases, either with the breast cancer or a build-up diagnostic code, including the breast cancer diagnostic code. What we found was 117 claims from males and 89 from females. When we looked at the data, however, only 47 of the claims from male veterans actually had breast cancer. The rest of them were things like gynecomastia, breast lumps, nodes, things like that. But only 47 were actually breast cancer. Females, 16 of, actually there were 73 of the 89 females actually did have breast cancer. So when we looked at that, we noted that of the claims from male veterans, we granted 16 of those, which is 34%. Of the females, we granted 31, which is 42%. So the numbers were much closer than what they have been because of the variance and the non-cancer conditions which were noted in our database. So that's the report we will provide to the Senate staff next week, and certainly provide that to you as well.
What were the numbers again? 16 granted for male,
31, 16 of 47 for males, 31 of 73 for females. 34% and 42%.
Thank you. Now, are these Camp Lejeune unique?
Yes. Yes.
What about your overall numbers?
Overall for
veterans overall? For breast cancer?
Just for breast cancer?
Yeah.
That's it. That's the number.
I'm not talking about Camp Lejeune specifically. I'm talking about veterans overall.
Oh, I don't know.
Where did you get the numbers that you quoted at that meeting where there was this huge disparity?
That came because, as I said, we have coded as breast cancer, things like gynecomastia, breast lumps, things that actually weren't cancer.
So I think back then you were saying you had 51 cases of male and 51 cases of female. So looks like the male cases dropped by 4 and female cases increased considerably in 21. So the changes in numbers were more cases found, or just improper coding, or
not improper, but just the way we code disabilities. Unfortunately, data is not always my favorite thing because you can ask data 2 different days and get a different answer. But when you got millions of people in your database, though, that's not hard to understand, I don't think.
So this is Tim. My question here is, how were the diagnostic codes arrived at? Were they from the doctor, the vocational doctor, examiner?
No, VA has a schedule for rating disabilities.
I mean, who associated a particular diagnostic code with the claimant?
The claims processors.
So it's the claims processor that did it. It wasn't a doctor.
No.
So
okay, we have a rating schedule. We have 15 body systems, and there are about 800 unique diagnostic codes in those 15 body systems. Arthritis, there's a diagnostic code 5003. If someone has arthritis, that's the code assigned to that disability. There's a certain code assigned for breast cancer as well.
So let me take that example, arthritis, for example. How about difference between rheumatic arthritis, rheumatoid, and reactive?
There is a different code for rheumatoid arthritis than
reactive
osteoarthritis. Yes.
Is reactive maybe in there? Reactive arthritis?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
I do know that there's some illnesses that do not have a code.
A lot.
Yeah. So here's where I'm kind of getting to on the question here is who's assigning those codes, and is it possible that maybe they improperly are assigning the codes here? Maybe that may be an issue with the numbers. Is that possible?
It's possible, and it is the person who makes the decision on the claim that assigns code on the rating code sheet.
I just want to understand it better here because there is a difference in the numbers, and I've seen a little. I wouldn't necessarily call it a trend, but I have seen at least a few cases where the diagnostic code didn't match between what VA said and what the patient's doctor said.
Well, patients' doctors normally use ICD codes, and we do not.
So if you could just give me a little bit of a difference there between the two, a description of the difference between the two.
They say unique diagnostic codes, about 800 throughout the rating schedule.
How would they medically compare?
They don't.
They don't compare at all.
ICD-9 codes are usually they're used for billing purposes. Right. That's the intent of that. And they assign a code for a medical procedure, an X-ray, things like that. We do not. We identify diseases and disabilities through a unique 4-digit number. It has nothing to do with medical billing or anything like that.
I don't know. It seems to me that because of that, there may be a gap. That there's some gaps.
I don't think so. I don't think there may be.
Okay.
But there is an ICD-9 code for male breast cancer.
I'm sure there is.
And so, are there cases where a healthcare provider assigned an ICD-9 code for male breast cancer, but the VA assigned a different code?
No, VHA does use ICD codes because they see veterans, they treat veterans, and so they use the ICD codes. VBA in making decisions on claims, though, we have, like I said, the unique rating schedule with unique diagnostic codes.
Yeah, I agree.
Nothing
but you have a
ICD
code for male breast cancer, right?
Yeah.
Are there cases where an ICD-9 code appears in a person's medical record that a VA claims adjuster would assign a different code?
No.
Okay. And do these claims adjusters,
claims processors,
do they base their code assignment on a medical records review?
No, they base it on what we have in our rating schedule, the code in the rating schedule for breast cancer, for arthritis, for lung cancer.
So it is a difference.
Well, it's not an ICD number. No, I said we do not use ICD numbers in the rating schedule. Never have.
Why do you complicate things?
It's not complicated. It's easy for us. It's easy for our claims process.
Well, you just take the code
they assign codes for x-rays. That doesn't mean
we're not
anything to us.
talking about x-rays, we're talking about diseases. I mean, you don't have to use the x-ray code or the IV code or whatever. And use the medical code for the ailment and be done with it. You're creating a whole new...
We're not creating it. It's been that way since 1933.
Well, it's antiquated.
Who's that?
Sharon Mason. I'm listening. I'm a nurse and I know a lot about the ICD codes, and the government doesn't use it because their systems are different and very antiquated.
Oh, okay. Please don't chime in on the line.
Yes, sir.
Well, I guess what I had gathered and where I was going with this, you probably see where I'm at with it, but is that you had several that were male breast cancer to begin with, but then some of them dropped off of being male breast cancer because they were coded to something different. And I was curious who did the coding to drop them off?
Coded to something different. If someone claimed, there were claims for breast cancer from both males and females, but there wasn't evidence of cancer at all. That was the claim. So when we decide the claim, we assign our diagnostic code for breast cancer. But we would build, breast cancer, let's take, for example, it's, I don't know off the top of my head, 7646. I don't know. If someone claimed cancer and they had gynecomastia, we would assign a 7699 there, 7646, 7699, meaning it's a build-up code. The person doesn't really have it, but that's what they claim. And in order for us to determine claims, we need to have that diagnostic code if we want to gather full data out of our database.
But how do you know it's gynecomastia, right? How do you know?
That's because the doctor would say that's what it is.
So it does go back to a medical record of some kind.
Well, of course we review medical records. Of course we do examinations.
Well, I asked you that a minute ago based on any kind of medical record assessment. I thought you said
of course. If you asked that, I didn't understand what it is. Obviously, someone files a claim, we get an examination, request a medical opinion, whatever's necessary. We review private medical records, of course.
I just personally, I'd like to say that I see a bit of an issue here with the recoding, and I think that it's found its way into other areas. That's just my suspicion.
I have a question. Can you tell me what the Committee on Contaminated Drinking Water at Camp Lejeune is?
I do not know. I've not heard that.
It is appearing in the claim denials.
I'm not aware of that.
I'll tell you what it is. It's the NRC report.
Yeah, there's been several denials that we've seen, and coming back from them, it says that it's citing, according to the committee, the Camp Lejeune Committee on Contaminated Drinking Water, and it uses it in caps like it's a title, and this is a formal group of some kind, and so that's why we're very surprised that you haven't heard of it.
Well, it's in the NRC report, but I have not heard it.
Why are we calling it the Committee on Contaminated Drinking Water at Camp Lejeune?
Or I have no idea.
Okay. Up on the screen, Brad, is your actual website, the VA's website for Camp Lejeune Research and Studies. Okay. Who's operating this thing?
You want to click?
Yeah. Well, you need to. Okay. They've got these. Go for PCE. Click on that, please. September of 1997. That's what you've got up there for the most recent information on PCE on your current website. Okay? Let's back out of that and go to TCE. July 2003. I mean, it was declared a known human carcinogen on 28 September 2013.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Okay, let's back out of that. Let's to the last sentence in that paragraph. Up. Right there. The duration and intensity of exposures at Camp Lejeune are unknown. The geographic extent of contamination by specific chemicals also is unknown. This is where I come back to you and the VA, and I ask the question, is somebody just lazy, or is this intentional? And I ask the question, does the VA accept ATSDR's work as scientifically valid?
Absolutely.
Then why isn't it up here?
I don't know. But I'll take that back and have a discussion about that.
And I know that you like to try to put this imaginary wall between VBA and VHA.
There's no imaginary wall, but we have separate responsibilities.
You have separate responsibilities, but you're relying on medical people to give you advice or advice and then to end the claims the evaluation process. Your subject matter experts are not subject matter experts, Brad.
Well, they're
not working off of the most recent data. And you sent me an email and said, although the last training letter from VA was issued on 29 November 2011, you currently have everything you need to legitimately adjudicate veterans' claims for Camp Lejeune. No, you don't. They don't. They don't even have the most up-to-date information. These studies, the water model was issued in March of 2013, and other studies that ATSDR has conducted, mortality studies, that all came out since then. There has not been a new training letter. How are these people supposed to have this information if you don't give it to them? That is my point, Brad. I mean,
Jared, I will take this back. There obviously needs to be some further trainings and updated to that. We'll get that done. And I've spoken to Dr. Cross about citing the NRC report. He agrees we should not. And it's just a matter of training our subject matter experts.
And yet you told me that Dr. Walter's training PowerPoint had nothing to do with VBA.
That's correct.
But you were at that training. And these clinicians that are being relied upon to become involved in whether or not these veterans' claims are approved or denied are also being
my role in those two meetings was to explain, give them information on the claims process, and telling them how important it is that medical opinions are well.
And I've got two in my folder for male breast cancer that are citing the NRC report or the Committee on Camp Lejeune Drinking Water or the National Regulatory Council, whatever they decide to call this, the NRC report. It shows up in these denials over and over again. But ATSDR's work is not showing up in these denials. It's not being addressed in the denials. It's not addressed on your website, or not your website, but the VA's website. Okay? The information's there, and like Jerry is saying, the subject matter experts are not looking at this. There's no indication that they're looking at this material. Just like in the denial letters where, your reviewers are saying, well, we've looked over everything. There's no indications of the meta-analysis being done to support a successful plan. But yet, like I mentioned, we've got the EPA, we've got IARC, and I believe the National, Dr. Cantor was talking about the National Toxicology, I can never say that.
NTP.
NTP, thank you, is coming out with findings on TCE. The body of science seems to be well ahead of the VA, and the VA is several years behind, and it's coming at the detriment of the veterans who served this country, and it needs to be addressed sooner than later. Unfortunately, Dr. Walter's PowerPoint supports what we're seeing in the denials, and that needs to be addressed sooner than later. And that's where we're at right now. You know, you said at the beginning, you know, that I guess you were told that the VA's website was up to date. That's not up to date.
No, I would say it's not.
And that's what's available to the public.
It does have a link, though, to ATSDR studies there, is that correct?
Yeah, but you put a link to the ATSDR studies, but at the bottom, in the paragraph form, you cite but the VA cites the National Research Council concludes. Well, ATSDR's had 4 conclusions while finding a water model.
The key word in that paragraph, though, which is not highlighted, is the word, the report concludes that available scientific evidence. That study was done from 2007 and issued in June 2009.
I agree. You know, there's no question I agree with that, and I've had discussions with Dr. Cross already about using the NRC report in making decisions. He agrees that it should not be cited, and we will do something about that.
I mean, let's put up Dr. Portier's 2010 letter.
I'd like to follow on just real quick on SME, and I have an example that I'd like to throw out there. There was a Marine that I spoke with who shared with me his denial. In that denial, he happened to have immune deficiencies, right? They sent his claim to be adjudicated by an examiner, and the examiner was an SME. It showed on the denial paperwork that they were supposedly an SME. Took a look at their credentials to see whether they had internal medicine, infectious disease, something that would have to do with the immune deficiency. No, family practice. People with immune deficiencies don't go to normal family practice. They have to go to someone that has an understanding of internal medicine and infectious disease. So how did that happen? That's just one example I want to throw out there. I've seen others, and so the SME part of it seems to fall short of where at least I as a layperson would think it should be.
So just want to go back to the committee that we were talking about earlier, Brad. So this is directly off of the denial. Case-specific discussion. The Committee on Contaminated Drinking Water at Camp Lejeune has not determined a link between exposure to TCE, PCE, and the development of common variable immunodeficiency. I would like to put in as formal of a strongly worded request that we know exactly who this committee is and that we are told what part they play in the decision making, because it says here on your denial that they have made the determination. So I want to know who this committee is that's making the determination.
What committee?
That's what I'm asking. It's called the Committee on Contaminated Drinking Water at Camp Lejeune.
That's the NRC committee. It's the NRC committee. It's not a committee that exists in VA. Yeah, but let me ask you something, Brad. Okay, maybe I'm out of line, I don't know, but when you're going to present our studies, that's not our conclusion I see up there. The small number of cases in the study did not show any firm conclusions. This is your interpretation of our studies. If you're going to do that, that's fine, but it would be nice if you would also put our conclusion up there and quote it. Because that's not what we say in the abstract or in the conclusion of the study. And I think that's, it's very important that if you're going to describe our studies, your editorial comment is fine. If you want, I can't, every interpretation is, we can all differ on that. But at least it would be nice if you presented what we actually say in the journal article. If you could, thank you. That would make sense.
And I guess what I'm trying to say is, the way this is worded, it makes it sound to the veteran, like there's something that is not. So put NRC in there. You know what I mean? Unless there's somebody else that's on this committee.
NRC in there. We're going to try and work to get that out.
But be honest. Instead of hiding behind this kind of committee title, is what I'm saying.
I've never heard of that title. I'm sorry.
I have a question, real quick, just housekeeping sort of thing. Is there going to be any questions or ability to speak on the topic of VHA since we don't have anyone from VHA here, or because there's a couple of VHA matters that we were prepared to discuss.
Without a representative, we have the option of completing with the VA first. We have a little bit of time before lunch. We also have CAP concerns directly after lunch where we can state them then as well.
I just think if Chris will give me a second, I know he's been wanting to speak, but if you could just give me 1 second. I'm pretty much concerned with the civilian side because of my father was civilian DOD on the base for years. But my background is marketing, messaging, that sort of thing, and I think this gets at the heart of the messaging in 2 senses. Number one, the messaging is not correct when they arrive, but I guess my concern, just from reading an email as well, I guess my question is, how does the VA conduct research, or actually not research, but reaching out to veterans about this information? What's the frequency? How many people do you reach? And then, because I know you might mention that there may have only been 15,000 claims, but is that for lack of them understanding, and then or hearing anything about it, and then when they do come to this website, they rule themselves out based on this information? Because as I go through the community, I meet people daily that either have not heard about it, or when they do hear about it, do not know where to go. And then when they do find out where to go, they read this information, and then they go, "Oh, not me." And that seems to be how it plays out. So I'm curious to just how many people the VA reaches out to in the service, and the frequency, and what they hear.
I'm not aware of any numbers. The Navy reached out to everybody they could identify that was at Camp Lejeune, sent them a letter. Jerry, of course, been in the documentary. He's been on TV. The information is out about Camp Lejeune, I think. We did reach out to people in the healthcare eligibility. I don't know the numbers. That's in VHA, but I do have some information about that as well I'm going to provide to you. Other than that, VHA does research, but the types and who all is involved, I'm not sure it's on Camp Lejeune. We do research on a lot of different things.
I guess my concern again goes back to the messaging, only because if it is up to the military and to the Department of Navy, for example, their website, they have information that both civilians and veterans can access. And one of the things I found was a 2012 document that's a pamphlet that also references the NRC and also mentions that according to the latest studies, there's no information or any connections and that sort of thing. So it seems like the same sort of messaging and same sort of information that's problematic here is also problematic throughout.
Brad, I wanted to take a second. Ralph Burking, who's a breast cancer survivor, Camp Lejeune veteran, and was denied in March of last year after an appeal. He sent me a notice, says, "I almost quit trying, almost gave up. This statement of the case they sent me is so depressing." And the reviewer noted in the denial, didn't come out and stated, I'm hypothesizing that it's the NRC report, but the quote, "The examiner noted that the only definitive studies that have been performed regarding this type of exposure do not recognize a causal link between the drinking water and the development of breast cancer." And he's referring to his exposure to Camp Lejeune. The only definitive studies. What are we talking about? And this guy's denied.
I don't know. Was that from the Board of Veterans Appeals?
I'll bring it to you. I'll show you what it is here. But it's his denial, and they have that in there it's under reasons and basis of forced denial.
Okay. Brad, I want to point
point out to you, and I had a very detailed conversation with Dr. Walters regarding the Camp Lejeune Family Member Program and the application process for that and how flawed that process is. One of the topics we had brought up, and I asked Sheila to pull it up here on the screen, this is the form that you are asking family members to fill out when they apply for benefits through the VA. I'd like to scroll down to the drug abuse, alcoholism or alcohol abuse, testing for infection with HIV, and sickle cell anemia, and ask you what on earth any of that has to do with Camp Lejeune family member benefits.
I don't know, but that's a standard language that we use because there are statutory provisions which do not allow us to release that kind of information without express consent.
In November, I was told that this form would be pulled down and that an appropriate medical release form would be put up. There is no possibility that a civilian or a dependent can fill out this form with any kind of success. And I would also like to know how many family members have applied for benefits and how many have been approved and how many have been denied.
I have that information. As you know, the regulations for veterans, we started treating veterans from the day the law was passed. Family members, a different story because we had no prior history of treating family members for anything, and no way to do that without regulations. They were lengthy. Regulation process is lengthy. I know you're all aware of that. So far, 156 family members have applied to this program. It's too new as of this time to have any statistics on who has been approved or denied admission. We really don't know that at this time. We are required by law, however, to provide this information to Congress each year. 16,320 veterans have applied for the Camp Lejeune program as of September 30th, 2014. 13,372 have been accepted into the Camp Lejeune program as of December 30th. 2,816 veterans report at least one of the 15 covered conditions, and 1,231 have been treated by VA for a Camp Lejeune condition under the law. As the latest data we have.
So would it be safe to assume that the VA is denying people like they denied me, which is simply to state that you don't have one of the following conditions? That's what I received. I received I'll be put on a shelf and not a denial. So I would suggest that you're fudging the numbers. And
I would suggest that we are not.
Well, since he kind of went to that topic, there have been several Marines that I have spoken to that have applied through the VHA for treatment and so forth that have been denied. It just came back and said that they were denied. I'm not going to use my own case, but there were a couple of others that they don't know why they were denied. They just said,
do they have one of the 15 conditions listed in the law?
No.
Well, then they would not be eligible for care.
They would not?
No. You have to have one of the 15 conditions in the law to be treated for.
That's not true.
Yes, it is true.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely true.
No, you actually can apply for veterans for VHA. All it asks is that you were there for 30 days.
You have to demonstrate one of the 15 conditions in the law. That's in the law.
That's in the law.
Yeah, it's just,
you can look it up.
It is. It's right here in there prior to 15.
I would suggest that you've only received 128 applications for family member benefits because you don't even have the correct forms on the website.
156.
156 out of how many estimated? I noticed that you were estimating 3,000 per year.
I did not estimate that. I have no information on that at all.
That was in the up for comments section. That you estimated 3,000 per year with the total man hour of 15.
In the regulations.
In the regulations.
I don't know where that came from. The other thing about it is we did ask two of the conditions listed in the law are neurobehavioral effects and hepatic steatosis. No one really knows what that covers. So we asked we asked IOM to provide us with exactly what they mean by those conditions so we know who we can treat and ensure we don't miss anyone who may have something like that. The report is scheduled to be released in March, and we're looking forward to getting that.
Could you repeat the two conditions?
Yes, neurobehavioral effects and hepatic steatosis.
Also known as fatty liver.
Also known as fatty liver, yes.
And just to say, this is one of the reasons I'm so anxious to get Dr. Schur here, the immunotoxicologist, because the newest research is showing that exposure to toxins creates inflammation, and inflammation is being linked to autism. Science, not hooey. So these things are going to be important in the future. So I think getting this expert involved is really important. Just want to throw that in again because I can't stop beating the horse. Brad, I have a question that I promised Marine, who lost his wife, that I would ask you. He needs the statistical evaluation of how well Louisville is doing with approving and disapproving veterans' claims. He says he has the last 3 of those that have been published by different sources, but there's a lot of doubt as the correctness of the numbers of the disapprovals and approvals. So he would like to have some transparency and to have an update.
Whenever you have a subject matter expert cited in a denial, a denial through the VBA, why don't you cite the name of this subject matter expert? I mean, this person is involved in making a big decision on somebody's life. Why are not these subject matter experts named? I mean, if they're a subject matter expert, then they shouldn't have a problem with their name being out there. I mean, these people work for the government, for God's sake, and they're making the decision. Their name should be there. Do you agree or disagree?
Their names are in the Veterans Claims file.
They're not cited in the
not in the decision. We've never done that.
How does somebody find out who this SME is, subject matter expert?
They can look at their claims file or they can ask. But I doubt that they would, they could contact them individually.
Well, I'm not talking about contacting, I'm talking about vetting them to find out just what kind of subject matter expert they are.
We got a request, I think, for some kind of information like that, and I believe our FOIA officers held that that was an invasion of privacy.
It is not. These people are making decisions for the federal government. They are employee of the government.
And we have examples where names have been given. So if some names have been given, then why can't all the names be given?
Well, Brad, these subject matter experts are overriding letters written by doctors. I've got a claim that I got yesterday from breast cancer where the physician wrote a letter in support of the veteran, and the subject matter expert basically discounted it, said that his opinion mattered more, and denied the claim. But without the name, without the qualifications, who do we know who this is? I mean, do we have a general practitioner overruling an oncologist?
I mean, that's without naming these people and giving their title. Your subject matter experts, for all I know, could be the janitor, or it could be Alfred E. Newman.
I don't know. I can't answer that. They don't work for me. I don't know who they are myself. So, all I know, they're identified by VHA as occupational environmental health specialists.
Well, it's really scary when I look at a decision and they're citing something that's supposed to be factual, which is the 2009 NRC report, and they get the date wrong and they misspell the word council.
I think we've discussed that. I will take that back. What we can about it.
Do we need to go, Jerry, is this something that we need to take up with congressional representatives?
I've already done that.
So, but it's something that the rest of us should also take up with our congressional representatives?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody.
So I would say to everyone listening, demand that the subject matter experts are named, and if not, that there's some sort of process for finding and for some sort of transparency, because this is people's lives, and I agree. I think I think Marines and their families who's deciding whether they get care or not. So everyone needs to contact the representatives.
And, you know, when these people accept their paychecks every month or every 2 weeks, whatever your pay schedule is, it gave up their privacy to keep their name hidden on decisions that they're making about somebody else's life. So, just food for thought.
Also, going back to the family member program, isn't the VA in effect asking civilian doctors to make a determination of whether exposure causes the illness for the family member?
No.
I would disagree based on what the process that has gone through.
There are 15 listed conditions in the law allowing treatment for veterans and dependents.
Correct.
If you don't have one of those, you're not going to get treated.
But you asked for a civilian physician to sign off on whether or not that exposure, that illness was caused by exposure to the water at Camp Lejeune.
No, that's presumptive. There's no reason
on the website.
No. No such thing.
Final questions, comments from Brad? Hearing none.
Thank you for showing up and taking all the heat by yourself, which I think somebody should answer for the fact that you had to do that.
I'll let him know how happy I was.
We're about to break for lunch, Tim. We'll handle your questions about VHA during the CAP concerns afterwards. We'll break for lunch and we reconvene at 1:15.
Okay. Well, kind of tail end of what we were talking about with Brad concerning the VA. Yesterday, we had a meeting with Dr. Bricey and Dr. Frieden from the CDC. He was gracious to come down and spend some time with the CAP. And as part of the meeting, we asked, and we've been asking and discussing this for quite some time now, that ATSDR put together the studies that have been completed and provide their interpretation of what these studies mean to both the VA and Congress. And this discussion we had before lunch concerning what's going on with the VA and the veterans who are trying to get their claims passed through the Camp Lejeune really is a case in point of why that needs to be done. And Dr. Frieden and Dr. Bricey both graciously agreed to undertake that, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to point this out because what we're seeing in the denials and where the VA is at, there is a disconnect between what ATSDR has done with Camp Lejeune, the studies that have been completed, and what the VA is doing, and hopefully we can get that accomplished. So I just wanted to point that out and kind of put that in context.
I had just one more thing also. Can you give us, you said you were going to take the website information back. Can we get a timeline? Like, could you say, could we just get, because what happened last time was the different people who were here said, we're going to take that back, and then you came back and said, they said that there's nothing wrong with it, but some of that evidence that we presented today was actually shown. So can you give us something a little more concrete, like?
I wish I could, Lori, but it's not my website. I can't change it. I can only take it back and talk to the people who own it.
But are they going to tell you that it's okay again, and then are you going to say, okay, I'll go and tell them it's okay?
I hope not. I will take that higher if need be.
That's reassuring, because I hope you fight for that, because it's a lot of the veterans don't know we exist. They only know your website.
It's pretty clear to me that it needs updating. I will be strong.
And if you do have any updates, if you could just, shoot us an email, and we can talk email, that type of thing. All right?
All right.
Thank you.
I would also like to kind of compound on what Mike has just talked about. There's a lot of body of work that has been done on the chemicals that is not necessarily being done by ATSDR. and it would be beneficial for those exposed as well as for Congress, the VA, and other agencies. If we could somehow take that body of work and put a summarization from ATSDR, specifically the works that are done on kidney cancer, congenital birth defects, specifically core truncal heart defects, and some of these other studies that have already been completed where it wouldn't necessarily be beneficial to conduct a new study, but to include that body of work in what ATSDR is putting together.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable request.
Tim, before break, you'd asked if we could have some updates on BHA concerns. Would you like to talk to those now?
Yes. In fact, one of the things that I think I was getting to just right before we kind of broke there was there is a form that is used to enroll for VA healthcare through the VHA for veterans, and you can either do it online or you can use the separate form, and that determines your eligibility. And if you're not eligible, then I'll throw you into a priority group like an 8G or something like that, right? Well, Camp Lejeune veterans are supposed to be put into priority group 6, not category 8G. So I've had at least a couple other Marines sent my way that said that they had gone ahead and turned in their paperwork for this to enroll for the benefits, but that they don't have any of the 15 conditions, neither do I. But what had happened was they were just told that that they weren't eligible, so they were put into priority group 8G. And I would like to ask why or what's going on with those. There's a box that you check on the front of it that says, were you stationed at Camp Lejeune for at least 30 days between these dates? It says on there, so I'd like to, if you could take that back for me, I'd appreciate it.
I will. I don't know, but I'll take it back.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to jump in too on the civilian issue. Just wanted to get it on record. I know we've talked about getting DOD rep from the FECA for the claim side and what they're doing. I just want to put in a formal request that we have them here. I know that their response was something on the order of having pre-screen questions before attending, that sort of thing. I think we can go beyond that and just have them here. That needs to be addressed. So I'd like to get that on record, and then looking forward to seeing the Marine Corps here to answer those questions about that EPA memo that Chris brought up last time that we didn't get answers on yet, including their outreach and what they're doing with their Camp Lejeune historic drinking water website and some of the information that's outdated there and some of the brochures. I'd like to hear, hopefully before we go another meeting, to hear back about that. So.
The question for ATSDR is the subject of the TCE, tox facts, tox profile. Is that going to be changed anytime soon?
Yep. The tox facts and the profile that came out for TCE came out last month, and it was posted on the website. I don't know, Jimmy, you and that maybe work with.
But it's still listed as a probable human carcinogen, and then down below it says that the EPA and IARC have classified it as a known carcinogen. But why doesn't your website say it's a known carcinogen instead of probable?
I don't remember the details. I mean, I think we updated. If you looked at the updated website,
the excuse I heard was that now you're waiting on the MTP.
And I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to go back and take a look at it because I don't know the details of that.
Why wait on MTP?
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't think we have to wait.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll get your question to Henry Abaddon. He's on the Tox group and he's not here today. So Henry Abaddon.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the chief of the Tox branch, and I'll get your concerns back to Henry.
But we can say that it's been classified a no carcinogen by the following groups. Right? That's a fact, and we should say it. Right?
That's what we're going to say.
So other.
I've got to pull those right now.
I'm looking at the talk spec right now.
Yeah, we can see, we can get specifics.
Yeah.
I don't remember this. I don't remember what it says on this one.
It says you can get dizzy by being exposed to it. Actually, it just says that trichloroethylene is a strong evidence that can cause kidney cancer and some evidence for liver cancer and malignant lymphoma.
We'll look at that and we'll make sure it's.
We had all the agencies.
By the way,
No. I was looking at the talk back.
Specifically talk about.
Scroll down, there's down further. Down further.
Yes, this is the
There's strong evidence that chloroethylene can.
So I need to figure out what we can and can't say, but I don't see why we can't say the groups have reviewed the evidence and say what they found.
We do it in the next paragraph. I think we did. We already said this.
Yeah, I don't think we need to have that first qualification. But let me make sure I'm not committing us something we can't do. But I agree that we should be. Those two paragraphs are not consistent.
And I don't like that disarming language up above and how it trichloroethylene affect my health. And the first thing you read is, well, trichloroethylene was once used as an anesthetic. Well, you can keep that in there, but move it down somewhere below. In my opinion, that is nothing more than a disarming statement to start that paragraph with. And I'm wondering how many laymen we go in there and read that first phrase and say, well, they used it in medicine, so it must be all right, and they quit reading right there.
And I think that's fair. I think we can look at that, and as long as
this is the versions of it's upper common.
Yeah. As long as we don't have to pay you as a consultant, Jerry, for web design.
I just remember how I was in this learning curve, and you know, the first thing that struck my mind was, oh, hey, they're saying this stuff's all right. But, you know, if you don't keep reading, you won't know the rest of it.
And also, you're dealing with marine culture, and Marines, the more not passive language you can use because if they find something that says that they're being, oh well, maybe I'm just being weak, I shouldn't explore this, I'm a Marine, you know. So the less passive language, the better.
Marines, you know,
that first sentence actually could go elsewhere. I mean, I think there's a part in the talk specs that say what are the uses of TCE, and might be better to put it there. I think it's trying to motivate the second sentence, which is the exposure to moderate amounts cause headaches and so on. But I think we can just say that without having to say that TCE was once used as an anesthetic. I think that can go further up. TCE was also used to decaffeinate coffee. Used a lot of inappropriate things.
After surgery, it was good to work until they realized people started dying.
Or whatever. Right. That's the thing that we
just take it out of there.
Right, to take it out.
Could we update the web page just to know the full status of TCE? Could we update the web page just to denote the full status of TCE? Could we just? I don't see it.
It's not on there, it should.
Yeah.
I mean, can somebody tell me when the ATP review should be done? I When will the NTP review be done?
Yeah, it's in the works. It's gone through a whole series of approvals, and I think the final one has been completed. So I'm really not sure when it's going. I think we're not too far away from it.
You make down orders. Because I thought we had it up. I just looked at it quickly. No, the cancer. I thought we mentioned smokeless status.
Now, here's another point. In the highlights, I mean, good Lord. I mean, should one of the highlights be that it's a carcinogen? At least say it, causes dizziness, confusion, nausea, unconsciousness, and even death.
Sounds like Cialis ad.
Go ahead.
Everyone did job quick. So we're clear on what the recap is for that? It's a review of that page?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there other concerns or issues to be raised at this time? Okay.
I will say one thing is this environment that we're currently in is a welcome change. May it last.
And just since we have one last little bit here, I mean, there's obviously, all of us, I'm sure, feel a sense of urgency, and we want to make sure that everyone else knows that there's a sense of urgency. We've talked about this for years and years and years now, and so as quickly as actions can take place to help the community, the better. That's what I had.
I would like to reiterate the absence of any DOD, DON. Again, we continue to invite them. I wish that they would attend. It would be a welcome change.
I would sign something saying that I won't be mean to them.
With no further issues to raise, Sasha, Janie has an update for some of the work that was done in our pre-meeting yesterday.
All right, so thank you. Thank you for letting me give you the summary of yesterday. We did have a meeting yesterday with the CAP and ATSDR, and during that meeting we went over our current charter language the current CAP charter guidance that exists and what's available. And our discussion, during our discussion, we went over the guidance very closely in 5 areas: the purpose, membership, norms of conduct, operation of the CAP, and goals for 2015. And during that process, ATSDR collected input from the CAP for updates that they felt were very necessary to include, as well as additions of new guidance to address the current activities that we have going on. And ATSDR has agreed to update the current guidance and provide it to the CAP in the next 2 weeks for review, and it will give that to the CAP for 2 weeks to review it. And then we will accept any comments and edits that the CAP has, and then we will finalize the guidance in March.
Excellent. Any questions or comments? Okay. Super. So as part of our wrap-up, we're going to just briefly review the action items to make sure that there's not only clarity what the deliverable is, but also who's going to provide it. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll start over on number 1.
So this is, I think it was Florida that requested documentation from the Navy on why they need to review source documents before that would be one of the things.
Or why, what the reason, rationale is rationalized.
So the action is a request to the Navy from ATSDR requesting.
In writing your rationale, or FAU.
Can I just, how we think maybe this might work is we'll try and clarify it as best we can now. We'll write it up and we'll send it around quickly to make sure everybody kind of agrees and matches everything once we actually put words to it. We'll try and do that pretty quick so we don't have lag time of weeks.
The second one was under the action items for the Navy, which was, I believe we got a report, a written report about notifying women related to vapor intrusion, and requested what this timely manner mean, and the second request was how exactly was the notification done, how that would be a Navy normal. For ATSDR, this is related to the, as it was referred to, a relational database from the Navy of their environmental data. Initially, I believe the CAP was going to provide language, but Dr. Brycey said we could look at, our scientists could look at what we would request.
Yes, yeah, so we need to look at the database and where we are and what we can get for the Navy to make it done better and quicker. But I think we need to have an internal review ourselves first.
This is an ATSDR item to define that. So this is for ATSDR and also the CAP. This was, I guess, raised in two different parts, but the web issues on the BHA research page. I guess during the items, list of action items, we committed to looking at that and providing some recommendations, and Brian committed to sharing that with the BHA. And then I think we go into further detail over here during the BA of some of the items that were identified. The tox facts, the outdated tox facts, the discussion of, we'll just get to that. But anyways, ATSDR and CAP review and feedback on that page of concern. Brad, BA, provide that to me. Okay. Same action items. VA's action items on, I guess, sending a representative from BBA, BHA, so whatever the three action items were that were not fulfilled, those will carry over. And then the question from Jerry for the VA, do you accept ATSDR's work? That's a VA deliverable. Actually, I'll put this up later, but this was the response that was not fulfilled by the Navy on the time.
The serial number of
when the GCMS started. I just added that back on. The Navy.
Can we put Jerry on that too? Because he needs to get him the serial number.
Okay.
Wait, what? We got the model number, but we haven't found the document with the model and serial number. Which we haven't done it either. I don't think we have. We haven't. Get him what you got. Or get it to us. We'll get it.
Then they'll come back and say, oh, we can't have it.
We'll look at it.
For the VA, confirm to the Camp Lejeune committee that's in the some of the denial letters, whether that's NRC report or something else, confirm what that is.
That's already been taken care of.
Oh, okay, so can we change it, instead of confirming who it is, can we change it to asking to restate it? Or, and challenge, why is it called this committee? Just misleading. Why not call it the NRC report? I mean, I'm not just happy saying because it's the NRC that we're going to leave it.
That seems like that was the title of the report.
The committee?
But every NRC report has a committee.
This is the name of the committee that put out the report. It's an ad hoc committee, but that's what they call themselves. What they should have said in these, instead of using that committee, they should have said the NRC report. That's what they should have said, so we all know what they mean, but that's what it is.
They said that it was a committee. Now we're asking you, again, that was the committee report. It's a committee that the NRC put together.
But you understand how, as a veteran, reading that versus NRC report is two different. The NRC report says I have something I can go see, I can go look at, I can research. That committee sounds like something that you can't ever be. Oh, there's a committee. Do you know what I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's common sense stuff, you know?
We'd rather be the NRC report of the committee which is what we're working on with Dr. Price.
Just cross out then? Is there anything to replace that or?
I would look at your
and ATSDR work together.
Adding the NRC report into the denial letters so people can go look at the report themselves.
With Congress to interpret the meaning and results of their studies.
There's a meeting.
I know, that's the next.
I think there's two issues. I think what you're saying is right, and what you're saying is something different. You'd like the letters to say, as I'm hearing you, not refer to the committee as the rationale for denial, but say we denied you because of the conclusions of the NRC report. And so they're asking the VA to make that change.
Alright, so that would be VA.
Yes.
Because to the veteran reading it, it's a big difference.
I wish the VA would quit referring to either one of them.
I said I would definitely take that back.
That's what I'm looking at. So we should capture, sorry, I missed it.
So do you want to capture the second part?
No, but I think there's a request for the VA to stop referring to the NRC report.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, as the definitive study for Camp Lejeune. The definitive review of scientific literature. I would say as the authority for Camp Lejeune.
I think it's important to remember, for some context, a lot of these veterans have already had to deal with the VA, and I know the VA is full of hardworking, good people, but there have been a lot of hardships for Marines and other service members to get care, and so some of them are coming into this with a bad experience already. So anything can seem really intimidating to them, you know. So the more we make it seem like there's some committee, and the more we use this kind of stuff to make them feel as though it's going to, you know, cost them 6 years to try and get care.
This gets back to the same one, so we'll combine it, but updating the research site and listed some of the things that were mentioned. But ATSDR will do a review, like members of the cabinet will submit that to Brad to take that. And then Lori asked for some sort of response or confirmation timeline as to when that might be. Those updates might be made. For the VA, the request for a statistical update from renewal claims. ATSDR, and I might have gotten this wrong, but this is, Chris, yours, a summary of related literature, and I think you specifically mentioned kidney cancer
and core truncal heart defects.
ATSDR. I did not catch, but Tim, it was yours talking about take back issues related to roofing.
Priority group for applicants for
And then for ATSDR talks facts to and then maybe in public comment right now the new or the updated TCE talks facts, some of the feedback that was provided on that, taking a look at that. And then Sasha, I didn't write down yours, but the providing the guidance in 2 weeks. Draft guidance document for review to make decisions. And that's everything I have.
Excellent. And there's one thing that came up yesterday that I'd like to get down and make sure we do. There was a request that we look at Mike's timeline and see if we can get it on our webpage somewhere. So if we can make sure we get a copy of that, and I don't see what the issue might be, but we'll certainly see what it would take to get that up there.
I've got an email due to you, so I'll send you the timeline as well.
Let me say something.
Okay. You know, Tim went through there and did some work on it too.
Send me what you got to get them. So I have certain versions. I've got all the versions from the beginning, and then let me see the final version. Then the schoolmaster has to see it.
Can I make one more request? Can we ask the VA to do a quick presentation on the family member program for the audience next time to come? Do a quick rundown.
When?
Maybe next CAP meeting or the one following. Since you only had about 150 respondents so far, I think we can do a better job of getting that out there for the family members. So if we can have somebody from the VA for that come down next time, that'd be great.
I got an email from that guy out in Colorado that's heading up the reimbursements. He wanted me to call him. I haven't called him back yet, but I'll call him this week.
I just wanted to follow up on a point that Frank made earlier about the ATSDR studies, and want to know, could the VA post links to ATSDR published studies on their website? I have ATSDR study conclusion, but that just as part of updating that page.
Excellent. So those are the recaps. As we adjourn, we have a discussion about when and where our next meeting will be. And Sheila, I believe you're best to summarize our discussion from yesterday.
So yesterday we discussed that our next offsite will be somewhere in North Carolina, and what I want to do is a group of us are going to get together and form a kind of a small committee. That will be myself, Frank, and Gavin Smith has been doing some work on that, and we'll start looking at some time frames. So we also want to make sure that we get this outreach to the right audience so that we have a good attendance to this. So be expecting something from me in the mail, email, sometime next week, probably Tuesday or Wednesday, where we'll start really pushing this one hard.
Where in North Carolina did we decide?
That's other piece. That's part of our discussion that we'll get.
Can I be on the committee?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the more the merrier. Yeah.
Oh, I thought she was saying there was only.
Well, I mean, we identified some people last night just to start moving this thing forward so we could go.
Yeah, I'd like to be involved with that.
And I think there'd be feedback from the broader.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the other part. I would make sure that this would be transparent, like we discussed yesterday. We'll make sure that even this process will be transparent to everybody on the CAP.
Because I really am going to try and push for Jacksonville. Yeah. I know, Jerry, but I'm still going to push for it.
Well, actually, I would want you on the committee for other reasons. The fact that you have many experience and that's a major thing. I'm trying to. We were talking at sort of ad hoc after the meeting about setting up a small group of people. So if anyone in the camp wants to be on it and thinks they can help us with the outreach, because that's the key thing here, as well as finding a place.
So it was really good participation when we were in Wilmington the year before last.
Well, there were two events in Wilmington. One was a symposium organized by the media, local media there, that was phenomenal. And then there was our effort, and we need to do the outreach that wasn't done the last time. So I would want a small group who would be good to work on outreach as well as figuring out where.
Right, and it goes back to, the airport's important. Gavin's points about having access to equipment's important. There's a lot going into it, but my argument is we have so much new science now that the symbolic value of being back, say, in the USO in Jacksonville, I believe if we make the story interesting enough, the media will come. And I believe that changing the way the military culture thinks, and it's just like with PTSD, there's been so many years of work to make it so men will come forward with their PTSD and say, I need help. We need to kind of change that culture so Marines, because I have Marines who tell me, I don't want to go get this lump in my breast checked. It was just my job to be a Marine. So I just feel like going back to Jacksonville and having active duty military involved and knowing about it and their families and all the retirees. So I'll be quiet. I know everybody wants to get out of here, but I just want to be in on that because I want to make my pitch.
I'll throw something in here. If you want to engage the community and engage a turnout like there was with the symposium, then what needs to be tied into this next CAP meeting is a presentation on behalf of the leadership of ATSDR summarizing the results of their studies, what they mean, what this is, and be able to answer those questions to the community.
A press conference.
Yeah, the community has been wanting those answers, and they have not gotten them.
So somebody asked a question with the symposium. What do we mean by that? There was a symposium. Was that
it was a gymnasium filled with
it was an auditorium.
What was presented at the symposium? Morris and I presented ATSDR was here too. This was 2007, so Morris talked about what had been done at Terra, since that's I think what's done, and what we were planning to do at Hanoi. And I was talking about the studies we were working on.
And these are PowerPoint presentations designed for a lay audience?
Yeah.
Can I propose something?
I don't know where they are now.
We do both. We have a one-day symposium beforehand where we focus on presenting the science to a broad audience as possible, and we follow up the next day with a CAP meeting where we talk about the details. If the symposium was successful, that's probably a better way, to be honest, to get the information to a broader audience than having them sit around this room or watching. So is there a possibility to do both?
There is, but Pat, we did. The problem is outreach. Okay? Not a press conference. That's fine, but if you don't do the outreach, it's not going to work. I used to be an organizer.
But I feel really confident in this group in this room. I really feel.
Right. Well, the problem was that we didn't involve people in this room.
Right.
Last time. This time, and that's why we want to set up a team that includes some CAP members, not all of you, but or as many as you want to be on this team. If you think you can contribute to, again, trying to build so we have a large participation from the community. So, and of course, our Office of Communication needs to be involved too.
Yeah, especially. Because when they did the symposium, Wilmington Star did it, and they went through newspapers all over the Southeast and had them publicize it for them.
We'll be creative. I've done this sort of thing before, and what we did was the week before, if there was a radio talk show, we went on the radio talk show and talk about the issue, and part of doing that was, saying, oh, by the way, if you're interested in this, remind you next week Tuesday we're going to be here doing this and that. So I like Frank's idea. I think we could be aggressive in promoting it. And if everybody likes the idea, I think having a symposium and a CAP meeting and separating the two. The goal of the CAP meeting is to work with you guys to move studies forward. The goal of symposium is to inform the broader community and get as much input as we can from them. So I see them as two different things.
Would you, like, I don't know anything about the symposium, so my question would be, would there be an opportunity for you to answer questions, press questions at a symposium?
I think we can make ourselves available to the press afterwards.
Okay, great.
I think that would be kind of different.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
We'd be open to answering questions to the public at this forum. You know, and if the press is there, you know, we'll have to stand behind what we say. You know,
and they also at this symposium, Star News brought in a toxicologist from North Carolina State, Dr. Joe LeBlanc. He spoke during the symposium. I spoke. Frank and Morris. It was, you know,
good. I like it.
Well, the critical thing is, I mean, that has to be answered or addressed in the symposium is what does this all mean? Because, you know, not everybody's engaged in the community. You know, people heard about this, they stayed on their fringes. There's been a lot of contradictory information in the media, by the Rank Corps, by ATSDR. We need to be able to answer for these families, what does this mean?
So we will get our act together and we will do a good job at that. That doesn't mean we know everything yet, because we're still got stuff ongoing, right? So there's still some, you know, detail to be filled in, but we can be clearer and more consistent about what we've done and what it means. And we can do it in public, we can do it in private with our stakeholders and partners, and we can do it here with you today in these meetings.
Could we have a VA representative there to answer questions?
Do you think that you would have the summary presentation completed by that time as well?
We'll have something summarized, okay, right? Recognizing that the summary, you know, we want to be very careful about putting together the strongest, best summary possible. And I'm new here. We have a lot of staff that are very busy. And I don't want to sit here and say we'll have this wonderful summary written as a bound document and, you know, wrapped up with a bow by the time we do this. But we will be summarizing the stuff in a better way as we go forward. And we'll talk about the time frame. We'll get back to you about when we think a real formal summary will take place. But this will be part of that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really, that means a lot that you're open to bringing something to the table like that. Thank you.
I've got one more thing I want to bring up. So yesterday during our when we were doing the charter discussion, we talked about membership, and so one of the people that has been in our audience several times is somebody that I brought up in emails and everybody we talked about, and people all agreed. And after yesterday's charter, we have agreed to bring Bernard Hodor on board for our next CAB meeting. So following this meeting, could you just stand up and let everybody see you? So following this meeting, he's going to go upstairs and get some paperwork done, and he will start sitting in on our calls and then be officially on board.
Hey, Brad, can you just tell us 2 seconds about yourself at a microphone?
Yeah, we'll sing a song.
All right, how y'all doing? I'm Bernard Hodor. I'm a disabled veteran. I've been since 1986, and I was at Camp Lejeune. I was exposed to contaminated water, and I'm looking forward to being on the camp, giving views and giving other veterans a lot of information about this Camp Lejeune water contamination.
Can you spell your name?
My last name is spelled Hodore, Bernard. Thank you. Thank you, and it's an honor to be on the camp.
Welcome. Excellent. Well, we've reached the end of our agenda, and our meeting's now officially adjourned. I just want to say one thing, okay? Please. So, coming in this week, and I can tell you this, getting ready for this CAP meeting and trying to get my arm around Camp Lejeune has probably been the vast majority of what I've been doing since I've been here. And I never thought when we were planning for this meeting that I'd say this, but I can honestly say thanks a lot. I think it's been fun. Thanks.
You're supposed to be upstairs. We're gonna be right. One of the two is gonna take you today there. Yeah, but it is. I'll wait till the end of that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, because you were around for the last one. Yeah, I was around for both before that. Yeah. Wait, you had the main slides down here.